Hello and welcome. Welcome to World Unity Week 2024. And today we're in the theme of unlocking potential for all. And so it's quite appropriate to have this amazing network of people with us today who are called Living Cities Earth. This is an extraordinary network that's growing very fast. With these souls who are so dedicated. They're the most dedicated and effective group I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. These folks can generate complex proposals in days, robust strategic and marketing plan in a few short months, and they're growing steadily with this vibrant energy. So this Living Cities Earth, it's a global bottom-up movement based on integral approach and dedicated to creating conditions for people in 10,000 cities worldwide to live a healthier, happier lives in harmony with each other and with nature. And this group has been building up through some of the connections in World Unity Week with living with integral cities and with the Russian Happy Cities network as well, and through COVID merged together to form into this global Living Cities Earth. So I'd like to welcome Ferial Puren today. Who's going to be our host, taking us through this magnificent session with so many of these evolutionary thought leaders who are really making it happen in the world. Ferial.
Thank you so much, Cara. That was quite an introduction. But anyway, we hope to do our best and to really just to bring who we are to the world. I think that's probably the best we can do, right? So there's no more that we can do. And so I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from wherever you are in the world right now. I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion. But before we start, I'm going to allow for one of our co-founders, Marilyn Hamilton. I'd like to invite her to chime us in. It's a common practice that we exercise in Living Cities Earth, and it's where we hold space for 1 minute before all of our meetings just to present ourselves. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Ferial. And I just invite everyone to be comfortable where you are. Take in a deep breath and just notice how we are all connected. We are all one. And take another breath. And come back into the awareness of your room.
Thank you, Marilyn. So I just want to again welcome everybody to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about sustaining our planet, exploring practices for environmental resilience in the places we love. So I'm Ferial Puren. I'm the CEO of Living Cities Earth and your host for today. Today, I'm joined by 10 of my most esteemed colleagues and co-founders of Living Cities Earth. And together, we're going to be exploring the major environmental challenges we face in the world today. Just before we started, we were talking about one of our members here, Artie. She's experiencing 47 degrees right now. So we think, wow, right? So we're going to delve into how our evolutionary history has led to the Anthropocene, right? We're creating complex, wicked problems that we're all experiencing in so many different ways. So we just want you to join us as we discuss how we at Living Cities Earth would like to partner with you, because this is not about us doing it. I mean, Cara was saying we're so wonderful, but I think it's about we're so wonderful, as in, all of us. It's how do we look at how do we address these challenges that all of us are facing in the cities and towns and villages where we live? And together at Living Cities Earth, we believe we can nurture environments on our beautiful living planet where all life can flourish and people can actually live vibrant, healthy lives in harmony with nature. So I'm going to start by introducing you to these amazing co-founders that have joined me here today and tell you why they together with our other 90 co-founders and our now more than 1,000 strategic partners, have spent their entire careers investing in gaining knowledge, insights, and wisdom that we believe at this moment can, we're not saying it will, but we think it can address some of our personal business and community challenges. And of course, in the hopes that in doing this, we will all live, hopefully, into a much better, kinder, more beautiful future together. And I'm going to start by introducing you to James Gien Wang. He is a co-founder of Living Cities Earth, and he's also a co-founder of Stop, Reset, Go. So he lives in Cape Town, the place of my birth, South Africa, but he is originally from Canada. He's a Commons Action researcher and principal co-founder of Global Citizen Collective, which I mentioned before, called Stop, Reset, Go. And this is based on a simple and accessible 3-step process for rapid whole system change. So he comes from this kind of background of decades of industrial electronics systems and R&D, tech. He's been involved with this in Canada. And out of that space, Gien co-founded Stop, Reset, Go and transferred his systems training to tackle our global polycrisis using bottom-up commons-based approach that recognizes communities, towns, and cities as the fundamental building blocks of civilization. And next, I'd like to introduce you to Ari Alawalia. So she lives, Ari, I hope I'm saying this correctly, but she lives in Gurgaon, India. You're welcome to correct me. So Ari is a United Nations representative and coordinator of publications for the UN Commons Cluster NGO Major Group. She also manages her family construction business and several other entrepreneurial ventures. So Ari is a serial entrepreneur. So Ari excels in areas of problem solving and designing innovative solutions. She uses agile philosophy, design thinking, systems thinking, and recently she's been working on the laws of nature concept, applying these approaches in her learning programs and re-engineering concepts to transform organizations and institutions. So she is, in fact, the Living Cities Earth right now helping us within the process segment and our provision segment. And the teams, they help to design the processes and technologies that Living Cities Earth uses to deliver our value to the world. Next, I want to introduce you to Andy Ferguson, a very, very dear friend, close friend of mine, because we both live in Scotland. And he lives in a little town called Linlithgow. And he brings a lifetime of experience as an educator, mentor, and champion of people, helping many sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life in many different environments and situations to develop a greater understanding of themselves, their world, and their place in it. And Andy's one of those people that had literally walked the length and the breadth of Scotland, taking people on what he calls these soul-to-soul walks. So in doing this, he hopes to realize the potential, right, for people to live better and happier lives. And Andy is the co-designer of SRG Journeys along with myself. And this process is this evolutionary self-awareness, consciousness, and resilience nurturing technology. Andy serves within LCE as the Director of Communications. And next, another dear friend and co-founder, Bong Vergara. He lives in Santa Ana, USA, and Bong currently co-leads a tech transfer firm focused on using technology to solve problems at the nexus of food, water, and energy systems in a kind of emerging markets, and specifically focusing a lot more on the Southeast Asia region, but we're now expanding within other regions in the world as well. And he, together, to actually realize this, he convenes a consortium of 300 plus research labs, startups, and non-governmental organizations committed to localizing the net zero transition. right? We're all heading towards that, as in we have to reach some targets, and Bang helps us in Living Cities Earth to assist cities and places around the world to actually do that. He currently leads initiatives in the Philippines and the US that links clean energy, the arts, and social equity for rural and indigenous communities. Bang is our provision segment leader for Living Cities Earth, and his team helps find and manage the resources LCE needs for its work. So we can't do without him. So Dr. Marina Demchenko is next. She is one of our beautiful co-founders and originally from Russia. Marina is currently living in Oxford. She has a PhD in economics and substantial experience in global change management. And for more than 20 years now, Marina has been researching the patterns and principles of integral, personal, organizational, and place-based development and well-being. She's the co-founder of the Russian-Swiss-American Panorama Lab, and she was the first ever advisor to the mayor of the city of, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but Marina, you can fix it later, right? City of Zverevo, Russia. I don't know if I said that correct, but she advised on the holistic well-being and happiness of the citizens. And during this time, she developed a wonderful program called Inner Keys. And it's a methodology for the diagnosis and assessment of evolutionary development of social systems. So a key component of what we use in Living Cities Earth. And Marina, at the moment, she was our co-CEO, and now she is helping us in many different areas of research and development. And we have next Nathaniel Whitestone. We know him as Nate, and Nate is originally from the US, and he has great hair, right? But now he's living in England, and his work focuses on supporting the global transition from toxic power to a world where healthy ways of being powerful together are the norm. Well, Nate, I love that work. We need some healthy power, right? Power is out of control right now. And he is a co-founder of a Ferris Society, Sonic Wise Kick, and Control Shift Network community of practice. Also a part of Sonic Europe and the Eco Village Network of the Americas. So he's also a principal consultant at the Governance Alive. And Nate is currently the practice segment leader in Living Cities Earth, where he's working with a bunch of us and his teams to deliver tailored solutions for the people and cities we aim to work with. So I'm pretty sure if you're living in a city and Living Cities Earth is going to be working with you, you're going to get to know Nate. Now we have one of our principal co-founders, Dr. Marilyn Hamilton, and she's very well renowned around the world for her work with integral city and meshworking, right? So she's originally from Canada, and she now lives in Findorn Eco Village. And Marilyn, this is in the UK, so she's close to me as well, in Scotland. And Marilyn is the founder of Integral City Meshworks, Inc. Her meshworking kind of appreciative inquiry and action research methodologies build capacity for individuals, groups, organizations, and communities to inquire, act, and impact city well-being. So she's the author of the Integral City book series and has developed many, many training programs for Findon College and Ubiquity University's Master Regenerative Action with students in 70 cities around the world. Humanity Rising programs have live streamed to thousands more, including Marilyn's programs. And Marilyn also leads our Wisdom Council because she's so wise and we love her to bits. She's our mom in Living Cities Earth and a director of the Living Cities Earth UK legal entity. And next we have Todd Johnson, and Todd, he lives in Los Gatos, USA. And Todd has an interesting story because Todd's mom, Gail Taylor, who is now the late Gail Taylor, she was one of our co-founders. And that is how Todd managed to become part of the Living Cities Earth family, because as she passed, we needed her work, which is so integral to what we do. And so we really feel so blessed to have him on our team. And he works on developing, and this is why this is so beautiful, right? He works on developing and deepening social processes for mutual learning and co-creation in harmony with living systems, principles, and regenerative practices in organizations. Like he works in with organizations like the Value Web and Tomorrow Makers, who was also started by his mom, Gail Taylor. And he also currently helps design collaborative frameworks and learning. And for us in Living Cities Earth, helps work with these kind of learning, with the Learning Academy that we hope to realize in the very, very near future. So thank you, Ton, for joining us. And next we have Yuri Noimir, and he's originally from Israel, but he now lives in Crispina, Italy. And Yuri is the co-founder of Bama Maps and the Albero, a social arts facilitator in Imagine Action and an interactive theater teacher. He's an observer of transformative patterns in human ecosystems, weaving diverse networks of social arts and innovation across borders, right? So he feels absolutely passionate about making visible the invisible, because it's such an important part of our lives, right? We're so focused on what we can see, but what about everything else that is weaving together and working together to actually have us have a specific kind of experience? So he likes to build collective dreams and empowers people and communities, right? In Living Cities Earth, he supports and facilitates co-creation programs across the board. And last, but certainly not least, we have Timothy Olsen. Again, we know him as Tim. He's originally from Sweden and now lives in Cape Town, South Africa. Again, my birthplace, right? So Tim is a democracy enthusiast and systems innovator. He founded an organization called Social Systems Labs in Cape Town in order to further a practical discussion into what a new operating system for a sustainable global civilization might look like. And of course, if it's designed with algorithms, my apologies, that underlie human behavior, and it keeps that in mind. So he's currently designing a social networking application for change makers to support civic and environmental engagement that Living Cities Earth hopes to offer to cities as a solution in the future to help facilitate co-creative projects in cities. Bong, a few days ago, he sent me this little clip, apes stronger together. And that's the point, right? And I was like, yes, Bong. So I'm not calling you apes, right? But I'm saying we're stronger together. And I'm excited that hopefully that is what Living Cities does, is we help all of us be stronger together. Now, I think you can agree with me after just hearing all these very illustrious bios that this is an awesome group of people. And although all of them are co-founders of Living Cities Earth, you will notice that they come from very, very many different parts of the world and from many different disciplines. And of course, you see, we have variations of humans here, different races, and this is by design, because they're an example of what our ecosystem represents. So to provide this integral approach solutions, we needed this kind of diverse team. And now that you've met them and you understand a little bit more about what they bring to the table, let's look at their work. Let's look at how they help us, or how they can help us. And of course, they understand that they're just one piece of a puzzle, and that's why we have 100 co-founders and thousands of strategic partners. And we hope that you will become one too, as you're listening, right? So I'm going to invite them right now, now that you know them, and I'm going to ask them a few questions, and let's see if they help us sense make through some of the challenges that we face, and hopefully we turn them into opportunities, right? So Guian Wong, welcome. Tell me, how have evolutionary processes and historical societal structures contributed to our current environmental challenges in this era in our history that many scientists are referring to as the Anthropocene. You and I have had many conversations about this, right? So we know that this is a time in history where humans have had an especially destructive impact on the ecosystem we're a part of. So please share with me your thoughts on this.
Thanks, Ferial, and thanks for inviting me to this this wonderful online gathering. I think first thought I had was when before we started, when Artie mentioned that she's at 47 degrees Celsius, and then I've been watching the conflicts around the world unfold in Gaza and Russia and Ukraine, and thinking how crazy it is that we're all fighting each other while all this extreme weather is happening all over the world. So that we're definitely in a wicked problem here. A social mess is another technical term for it. Self-explanatory. I think that I have a sense that there's a singularity that's we are approaching, and it's not the singularity that Ray Kurzweil alludes to about AI, although that's kind of related to it. I think the singularity is a singularity in cultural evolution. And I believe that if we're going to transition into a thriving species and a thriving biosphere, our species has to undergo this very dramatic cultural evolution singularity event in the next few years, I would say. So I think based on that, my presentation that I've prepared is on the subject of evolution. And can I share my screen? Awesome.
Please, yeah, just share it as normal.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
I do.
Okay. So this is just a short presentation that kind of focuses on one aspect of the research I've been working on. But from that one perspective, if you look at it from that perspective, I think you can make a lot of sense of what's going on today. And so I begin with this comment from an unknown source. I think we've all heard it in one form or another. You can't really know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So evolution is a big part of how we got here. And there are two forms of evolution, actually, two journeys that are in parallel. There's the civilizational journey and the individual's journey. So each one of us here and all the participants were born at a certain time and will die at another time. So we have, in between our birth and death, these two milestones, we have our life journey, right? That's the individual's journey. But at the same time, we're embedded in this larger journey of all the other individuals of the planet, all 8 billion of us. That's our civilizational journey. And while our individual journey is measured in years, the civilizational journey is measured in centuries and millennia. And there's an entanglement, or a more appropriate word, an intertwined connection and relationship between the individual and the collective. And so within this open source praxis that we've been developing at Stop Reset Go called Deep Humanity, we've coined the term individual collective gestalt to kind of illustrate. We developed this term in order to show how the individual and the collective are completely intertwined. And that's a very important concept, as we'll see later on. And at this time, there's also two parallel extinction events that people are beginning to think about. The individual extinction event is guaranteed, of course. We call that death. You know, we're mortal beings. But there's a civilizational extinction possibility that's less certain. But of course, we have the ability to determine our future if we can imagine and follow through with it, which is what all the people in this group and many thousands or hundreds of thousands of other groups around the world are trying to do. And a very good book and a researcher who kind of addressed this point of our mortality is Ernest Becker in his book called The Denial of Death. And so I think there's a really deep connection between the individual extinction, our denial of death, and the civilizational extinction. That's a potential now. So like the beginning frame suggested, in order to know where we're going, and in order to know the future that we're going to create, we're going to imagine and then realize, we have to know where we came from. And so on this frame are some of the influences in my life that shaped my perspective on the role of evolution. On the top left corner is my cat, Vishnu. And, you know, for those of you who have pets, you know how important the relationship with a pet is. So I've often thought about what Vishnu thinks about, you know, us humans, you know, when I relate to her. And, you know, my wife and I sometimes talk and look at cell phones, and there she is, she's looking at these two humans interacting and looking at this box, you know. So what does Vishnu think of us? And so right next to Vishnu, there's a picture of this book by a philosopher named Thomas Nagel. In he wrote in 1974 called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" So I often think I apply that to my cat, and I think, what is it like to be a cat? And I kind of introduce this frame with Vishnu because I think it's a really important question. You know, here I am, an individual, a self in the world, a self unit, a self biological unit, like all of you are. But we think of others, you know, we have our own private inner experiences, and then all the others are not our own internal experiences. So if we can develop empathy and stronger communication with other species, like our cats or our bats, and with other human beings, I think it would actually go a long way in this evolutionary milestone, this singularity that's approaching. We're trying to shape the future in the best possible way. And I think that really depends on our ability to communicate with other living beings. And Jacob von Wechsel, a German scientist, came up with the word Umwelt. And the Umwelt is the individual organism's environment and what's salient to that individual. So what's salient to my cat Vishnu is not exactly what's salient to me, the human being, right? So human beings have their own little Umwelts as well, you know, and the Umwelt between myself and other species, individuals of the other species, is even larger. So that's a really important thing to note about how we relate to each other. You know, what do we find salient? What do each of us as individuals find salient? Do you have any questions or comments at this point, Ferial?
No, I'm actually just really listening very intensely. You know, I enjoy spending time with you talking about these things. So please continue sharing.
Okay. There's only a couple of minutes left here, so I'm just gonna, there's a whole bunch of other things here, but I think the main topic I like to focus on is this kind of, these words about in the center here: evolution, biological, cultural, individual, collective. And then draw your attention to the left side of the panel, this book called A Short History of Progress by a anthropologist, Canadian, named Ronald Wright. He popularized the term progress traps, and this is a term that I've come to holds very important in explaining and understanding and sense making how we arrived here as a species. And a progress trap is quite simply an unintended consequence of progress. So when we intend to solve the problem and we model the world as best we can, but we don't model everything because we can't capture every single relationship about one aspect of reality. And so that is where the relationship between science and spirituality comes in. Because in spirituality, especially in Eastern philosophy, there's a concept called shunyata, or emptiness. And emptiness has two major pillars. That one is change, everything is in flux, and the other is the whole universe is intertwined. Everything is interconnected. And so progress traps happen because human reductionism is finite and always produces finite amount of knowledge. But we have to act on that knowledge and produce some artifact in the world, which then spreads out through the whole planet. And yet nature has multitudes of relationships that we have never explored, even when we've created a technology. So that gap between the finite and the infinite, what we conceive and design and put into the world at scale, and how the world behaves in response to it in so many millions of different permutations, out of that can come an unintended consequence. So one of the things I champion is that we should develop a science of progress traps to understand the gap between human understanding and nature itself. And so if we look at nature from this perspective of progress traps, I think it explains a lot of how we got here today. And I think that's my time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gian. And for me, this kind of civilizational journey we've been on has been an incredible one. And there has been a lot of gifts that it's brought us, but it's also brought us a lot of challenges. These progress steps you speak of, Gian, and that we've been exploring within the SRG and SRG journey process, right? Together. And I think I'd like to take away from you what you've shared with us now, that we have to consider and be honest with ourselves. There is much about our past we do not know. We don't remember because it wasn't written down, or it's just not possible to take in what we've already experienced. And then you talk about the knowledge that we are even currently sharing. There's too much there. So how do we think we can make such definitive suggestions, definitive conclusions, definitive solutions, directions, when we know but a minuscule amount of information that we need to know? So I guess we continue to pursue that information, but can we be honest with ourselves is what you're trying to say, right? And saying we have a massive knowledge deficit and we're always operating from that deficit. And we're not only operating from that deficit with civilizational progress, but you brought it back to the individual. We're also doing that with each other. There's so much we don't know, and we're making all these assumptions about one another, not spending time holding space to understand perhaps deeper reasons for why tensions are existing, and the reasons possibly we're having wars. So thank you so much, Gian. That was beautiful, and I wish we had longer time to discuss this because I know there's a lot more there. So I'm going to invite. I apologize. I'm going to be coughing a little bit today. There's a bit of niggling in my throat. Artie Alawalia, also a dear friend, had worked alongside Gian and myself and Andy, who would be next. And Artie, we had loads of conversation about this as well. So in what ways has a predominantly left-brained male dominated? Because again, Gian just talked to us about our history. Let's be honest here. It was male dominated, right? And probably still is, right? This kind of decision-making approach that we've taken based on that, how has it impacted our environmental policies and practices that we today are invested in? Also, given the fact that Gian has just said, we sometimes can be overly invested in ideas that we think are so, the right thing, the solution. Is it, right? So will you talk to me a little bit about that?
Thank you, Gian, first of all, for setting the base, because I think all of us are going to flow from the reality that you so very well, shared with us. And thank you, Ferial, for actually having me here. And thanks, everyone. It's always a pleasure to, unravel these mysteries that nobody's willing to touch. So I had a different idea that I wanted to talk about, but what Gian is talking about is actually central to this entire, discussion and the range of topics that we'd be talking about here. When you look at decision making, that in itself gives you a certain sense of control, a certain sense of power, a certain sense of importance. Irrespective of being a man or a woman, we fall into that trap. Okay. So honestly, I'm not a feminist because I think that there are clear differences, and it has something to do with the need for being recognized, which is why feminism happened. In terms of decision making, or the left or the right brain, I think each one of us has a dominant left brain operation or a dominant right brain. It has nothing to do with genders, if you think about it. Even if you were to look at what Ian McGilchrist has actually spoken about, who's literally an authority on the whole left brain, right brain argument, it has nothing to do with gender. It has a lot to do with conditioning. And when you look at the reason that we've internalized a certain conditioning as a culture, both in terms of imposing it and accepting it, we've operated from a position of convenience as a society because we aim for certainty. We keep forgetting that we are significant and insignificant in equal measure for a period of maximum or minimum 60 years of this transient life. So the flaw in our culture in terms of decision-making or being at the helm where you are required to make decisions, or it would be exciting if you get there to make decisions, that whole paradigm has to now shift in the context of the fact that I'm sitting in 47 degrees. 1,000 plus people died in the Middle East yesterday because of 52 degrees. It's a clear sign that these divisions do not mean anything. We're 8 billion unique people trying to fit each other and ourselves consciously by choice into a mold of certain institutions and systems, whereas our individual dynamics are very different from each other. So at what point are we going to abandon this whole classification and act on where we need to act? So I move around in circles of construction, the energy sector in India, which is extremely male dominated because, well, they were conditioned and they had the opportunity to, come to a certain level and govern this whole industry or these segments of manufacturing and heavy industries. But as a woman, yes, I have to endure a lot of that perception and that notion that I would underperform or I'm not good enough or, well, I'm, not of the same cadre. But it just takes a pin to burst a bubble, you see. And the point is that the pin that we have today, this group, and a lot of groups like us across the globe right now, the pin that we have is the passion to change the narrative. Environment is not our concern. It's going to be there whether we are here or not. I say this in the highest places, in scientific communities, at the university level, even sometimes at the government level, that I personally have implicit trust and faith in the global capability in terms of technology. What we've never touched upon across our human history is the problem of human intention, irrespective of gender. We've got some terrible women also in position of power. We've also had some wonderful men who've really thought from the heart and created a system out of it. So I'm not one to look at the gender divide. At the same time, I also understand that oppression, it could be colonial, it could be gender-based, it comes with a very interesting byproduct, and that is arrogance. And that is like the arrogance to ask for equal space, even when fundamentally there is a difference. It's interesting to observe this take place in the grassroots to the highest realms of how we function and interact with each other. So yes, the one element that's going to play in our favor is that by design or by our conditioning, by the fact that historically we've been assigned certain roles of care, we understand that deeply. Maybe it's become a part of our DNA because, well, DNA is information. We are built of information. So the kind of information that has come through generations is who we are today. So this
Marty,
is the time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very significant, right? So it is really not gender-based. It is just, so going back to Guillen's evolution, right? So it's a topic I really think about, because if you think about the fact that women had been relegated to kitchens and raising kids and nurturing families and doing that for the longest time, and Dr. Ian McGilchrist's works and that of others specifically zones in on the fact that then what had happened, not because we're women, but because the conditions under which we had to evolve moved us in the direction of developing not right-brained, but whole-brained, your problem-solving ability, because we had to fix the issues in the home. We didn't want wars in the home, right? We created environments of nurturance in the home, which is the same environment that we need throughout our planet. Now, does this mean all women do that? No. Right? Does this mean all men do that? No. So you're right when you're saying it's about the conditioning. So the question that I'd like to ask you to just finish in a minute or two was, so what unique perspectives right now, knowing that I think the figure is something like 60% of women actually now do have that whole-brained capacity or whole-brained approach capacity. Whether they use it or not is another story. But what unique perspectives do women bring to environmental leadership, particularly environmental leadership, zoning in on this, and how can elevating those voices, right? Egos aside, we need to survive here. So we need to use what nature has evolved. So how can those voices help us address the environmental challenges and have that environmental resilience that we now need?
Absolutely. I think, women by design have learned to ride many dragons across their, span of life. And therefore, we are much closer to the processes of nature and how we think of nature, how connected we feel as mothers, as sisters, as daughters, as how we perform within these relationships. So there is this ability to look at connections and interconnections in a very nuanced and from the point of view of multiple influences. So in fact, now is the time we should take pride in the fact that yes, we carry a ball of twine above our necks, because it is the ball of twine that you live within. And coming back to something very interesting that you mentioned, that we've been conditioned to take care of the household. If the earth is not our collective household, how is it? What is it then?
You said it, girl. Exactly, right? So it's that moment of saying, and you're going to, any teams, when we form them, we normally put our best people forward. And so even when Lev Gordon came and asked myself and Marina as well to be CEOs, I was like, there's such a lot of other better candidates with lots of doctors in front of their names, right? And etc. And Lev was like, but Ferial, I think it's your kind of leadership that's needed. So what I'm saying is, maybe in our organizations around the world, maybe we should be considering thinking about this. What is the kind of leadership we need for this moment? And let's put our egos aside and survive.
Exactly. We just need a 2.0 version of ourselves, because the older way of sticking to your traditions and your ways of interconnection and interaction is not going to work in the future. So the sooner we realize that, the quicker, we all participate. Otherwise, historically, we've been operating on 50% of collective human brain because women have been kept out. So that's the truth that we got to play with.
We've been talking about this kind of original wounds and the woundings of the past, and we cry, right? We let them. That's why we let it go, because we can cry. We don't push it down. And I'm not talking about all women. We're just making that comparison, right? We're emotional, but the point of it is that needed now? Is there something about releasing? And I'm pretty sure our psychologists in the room will be able to tell us, yes, there's something about releasing your pain, right? So you don't take it into the boardrooms, you don't take it into the schools, you don't take it into the education places, but in actual fact, you let the brain pack it away as an experience, and you come into that with a whole other perspective, right? With a wholeness. So thank you, Artie. That was amazing as always. And I'd like to invite Andy Ferguson. So out of this kind of, Andy, This stuff that Gian had just been talking about. I apologize, my timer is going off. Gian had just been talking about and already picked up on. So this whole brain business that we just, kind of unearthed, how does this kind of thinking and decision making for individuals contribute to more sustainable and resilient environmental practices? So not looking at it from the meta, but looking at it from how do we bring it right to our individual person? Because often we feel like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about the planet, right? What are we going to do about what's happening out there? Because I feel like we have very little agency as an individual. But how do we foster that kind of whole brain thinking within us in order to tackle the big issues and contribute to them?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer, isn't it? I mean, it's so simple. I don't know. I think is the first thing. Do you know, I was listening to Guy and I was listening to you and Artie riffing off each other, and I've got a puzzle that I want to sort of maybe throw out there. So, I'm a old white guy, right? And I'm an old white guy, and I find myself increasingly going, the last person that anybody needs to listen to is another old white guy, right? That's the first reaction I have to this, right? The second reaction is this kind of imposter syndrome that you talk about. When you were introduced all these guests and stuff, I'm the least qualified person in this panel by far, I'm sure, in terms of academia and that type of thing. But I'm inspired by someone that was born about 30 miles in the direction of travel that I'm facing. And in fact, not a million miles away from where this beach is in the background, a guy called John Muir, who was born in Dunbar in Scotland and who became the father of the national park movement in the United States. He was a shepherd and he moved with his family out to the United States. And the story about John Muir spending years and decades in the wilderness and in California and connecting with reality, the natural world. And he was able to take Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president, to an area in Yosemite in California and influence that significant leader of the United States. And as a result, we have the national parks, and we have that whole idea of the Sierra Club and all these different environmental awarenesses that we now have. But you're asking about right brain and left brain. You're asking about, I suppose, logic and Cartesian thinking and Newtonian thinking. And as an old guy, I can tell you that I was influenced growing up in the 60s and 70s by two fundamentally different views of how we frame our world and how we understand the world. And I want to read something to you. In fact, I want to read two things to you, and then I want to go into that a little bit further. So the first, and I've only made this up in the last 2 hours. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, how I was going to answer that question, but I was rummaging in my bookshelf in my library, and I grabbed a book on electronics, which is what I studied 40 years ago. And I was trying to think, well, that's the science side of it. What have I got that's not science? And I grabbed a Bible. And I'm not a biblical scholar, so you'll have to forgive me, but I just want to read something to you, right? The first book of Moses, called Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved among the faces of the water. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light into darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening, morning were the first day. Now, let me explain why I want to read that to you. I want to read that to you for three reasons. One is I remember hearing that as a child. Second, I remember hearing my father try to read that as a child in church and struggling, as some of you may have noticed I was struggling. And I want to tell you that one of the biggest impacts in my life was when I was in my latter days at high school and I was trying to read something in class. And this very kind English teacher, who was actually the mother of one of my friends, so we're talking, you and Ari were talking about maternal instincts and all the rest of it, right? And she said to me in front of the whole class, Ferguson, would you just read what's on the page? And my soul sank. And I'm still, at 63 years of age, still hearing that voice in my head that says I'm inadequate. That's a voice that is not worth listening to, right? And I think that's how we all feel. And that's the enormity of what Gian was talking about at the beginning, which is we know that we are finite. We know that our life's journey is going to end. And if we're honest, we can look and say the planet's probably going to outlive humanity. It's going to outlive our civilization. So let's get real about that. And actually, to address Auntie's problem, think, what is the answer? What is the answer that we're searching for? So at the same time as I was going to church and hearing that, I was also fascinated. I'll show you the first book that I bought. Bearing in mind, I was told I was rubbish at reading. This is a book called Apollo Moon Landings. And again, I just picked this out my bookshelf 20 minutes before this thing started. That was the first book I read, first book I bought rather, with my own money as a kid. And it was a story about how 500,000 people got together to try and put a man, and it was a man, on the moon and return him safely to Earth. Now, the reasons why they decided to do that were actually quite horrific. There was a battle between, if you guys weren't around, there was a battle between two ideologies, the Soviet ideology and the American ideology. And it was about who can win that race and that argument first, right? And the science of the Americans and the economics of the Americans won out, and we got to the moon. And there was this hubris at the end of the 60s and into the early 70s that all we needed to do was break the world into this project and we could apply science to it and everything would be okay, right? And the irony on the back, I didn't realize this because I hadn't looked at this book for ages. The irony in this book is that the back page, the back cover is the famous picture that was taken on Apollo 8 by Lovell, and it says the Earth from here is a grand oasis and a big vastness of space. It was the first times that humans had actually looked back at the Earth, right? And so there is this wonderful dilemma that science and technology gives us a view of ourselves and of the universe that we've never had before. It gives us technology to change the world. That's why, again, we talk about we're in the Anthropocene, right? We are actually so capable of making a big difference. But equally, I think, like me, I think we're all frightened, right? I had a conversation with one of our co-founders, and in fact, two of our co-founders in Living Cities Earth this morning, a man and a woman, totally different, living in different parts of the world, different generations. And one of them said, you need to step up and own your space, Andy, and project what you believe to be true, and what you believe to be true is worth sharing. And somebody else who's a woman really sort of saying, and we just have to let go, because what Ari was getting to and what Gian was suggesting is whatever we do, we're going to make mistakes anyway. Whatever we do is going to cause the next iteration of problems, the things that we didn't foresee, the challenges that are going to cause pain and suffering to other fellow human beings and to plenty of other species, right? So you asked a fundamental question: how do we use our whole brain? Well, it's not a question of even using our whole brain; it's a question of using our whole selves, right? And I have to go back to Gain's idea that our whole self is this individual collective gestalt. We have to understand that we perceive ourselves and are perceived to be individual, and yet that is only one facet of who we are. And I think, stop making decisions in panic. stop making decisions in fear.
Mhm.
You know, we can think better when we're not mega emotional, but our emotions alert us to the fact that we need to take some actions. But our wisdom should kick in. We're using our whole brain, we'd be using our wisdom to say, we're not going to get this right, but we're damn well going to try. Yeah. And that's, I think, the best that we can do. We're not going to get this right, but we damn well can try.
And perhaps letting go of the idea that there is a happily ever after, right? As our little storybooks told us. But actually, there's just, so, you know, when I listen to you talking, there's just life. And we're all grappling with complexity. We're grappling with wounds. We're grappling with a past. We're grappling with journeys that we don't often understand. And again, we're back to, could we just be honest? Right? And you did that. You did that by saying, I'm still scared. I'm still doing all that. But the point is that you delivered something today of such incredible value, which tells me that within every human being, there is the capacity. If you apply yourself, if you're willing to cross beyond that fear boundary, right? And say, I'm gonna do what I can. You said it. Let's do the best we can. So
And support one another. The key thing is, right, that, you know, people say I'm sometimes vulnerable in public, and I'm deliberately vulnerable in public because we've actually evolved to respond to that, right? If we don't show our vulnerability, we never have that thing. And LC the other night, we had a meeting, and one of our members, Chantel, talked a story about a process in Canada where the women collected water and took it as a sacred journey somewhere, and the men were there to protect the women take that. And it's that idea that we can support and love and protect each other in our own vulnerability that allows us to be vulnerable. And it's in our vulnerability that we actually discover what we're looking for.
And then there's the desire that we follow, right? As in, that draws us, this kind of happiness we seek. And that kind of reframing of what does happiness actually mean in all of this. So with that said, Andy, thank you so much. I'd like to invite Marina. And Marina, you talk a lot about this kind of happiness. You've given some TED Talks and things like that. And so talk to me a little bit about how is that happiness central to how we actually design and how we think about impacting our societies and the decision making we do, and then expand a little bit on why do you think that is?
Oh, thank you so much for you, Ferial, and for all previous speakers. And let me share three main sort of notions on this topic. First of all, I think it's really important for us to, what we are focusing on in Living Cities Earth in our perception is, first of all, is about our self-identity and understanding of, profound understanding of our connectedness to the bigger systems. And it is precisely connected to the sense of happiness because each of us, we understand that individuals form organizations. So we are working in this 4P approach in Living Cities Earth, which is person, people, places, and planet, because people, we are not alone, we are not divided. And thanks to Artie and other speakers who told us that it is not wise to divide us into different categories, and thanks to our audience who also put these comments in the chat, that first of all, we are humans and we are the living beings, and we form organizations, teams, and communities and families, and organizations and communities. They form places where we live, and places form planet itself. And we decided to focus on the cities as their sort of focus of our research in Living Cities Earth, because cities as a social systems, they are in particular the oldest social ecosystems, because we born and die. Even states change their names, change their rulers, and we can see cities which are living for not even centuries, but for thousands of years. So that this is the most sustainable sort of example of a social ecosystem. And in this case, it is really important to understand that as we form organizations, so for example, if in the organization people are struggling with each other, competing with each other, can't reconcile their tensions, people will not be happy in these organizations. And if we see cities where organizations are dysfunctional, where families are not happy, where we have obsolete infrastructure, we have some cultural problems and environmental problems, poor ecological conditions, of course, people will not be happy as well. So it is really important for us to look at this connectedness and to look at ourselves not as the divided soul individuals, but seeing this ecosystemic nestedness and approach holistically to the problems which we are trying to attend. And speaking about the environmental issues and the sustainable development, I would like to cite the famous statement of Albert Einstein that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created these problems. So if we continue dividing ourselves, looking at us as representatives of different genders, different nations, different cultures, different religious races, I don't think that we will be able to solve such problems which sort of are causing planetary issues just right now. So that's the first the first notion I wanted to mention, that we all are connected and we need to approach to this, and we use this interconnectedness approach in our Living Cities Earth work. Another notion about happiness is that there is no universal happiness, as well as there is no universal solutions for different places. And we can't just come with the same solutions to all the territories. And while we are talking about sustainability, I just read a very interesting article which mentioned that in pursuit of sustainability, creating in the North Sea the storages for CO2 and building enormous wind farms, we are damaging the nature of the North Sea, which is sort of the representative and the very important part of their planetary nation. So it is really important for us to address the sustainability issues, thinking ecosystemically, because in some decision-making processes, in pursuit of the happiness of some individuals, or maybe in pursuit of the ideas of commercial sort of benefits of some technological organizations or some policymakers, we need to be aware that the bigger systems are not impacted in their negative way. So that's the next point, that we all are unique. And speaking about the sustainable versus regenerative approach, we use this regenerative approach in Living Cities Earth because we understand that people in their territories know better what would be the best for them. And it is really important to address the environmental issues place-based, keeping in mind the global impact, but at the same time, it is really important to ask people what they really want, what they really think, and to look at the natural conditions, cultural conditions, religious conditions as well, because we can't bring the solution which one fits all. It's really important for us to be humble enough to listen to people at the places, not just bring them solutions because they think that they are right. So this is why in Living Cities Earth, we are approaching through this action inquiry approach, what is really needed on the territories. And the third notion is about personal responsibility. It's really important to reconsider the very notion of happiness, because in Living Cities Earth, the approach that, yes, we have the happiness of consumption, there are solutions which can be brought by the policymakers, by the presidents, United Nations sort of representatives, solutions, technological companies which bring us some environmental solutions. But we really need to ask ourselves, each of us in our cities, in our places, what can I do myself? How myself I can take the agency for my life, for my responsibility, for my places, for my family, for my city, for the planet itself. And the unitive narrative which underpins the very vision and mission and culture of our organization gives a wonderful recipe for the well-being and happiness. So we know that we need to feel cosmically from the planetary perspective. We need to think globally, considering different impacts in different points of the world. And we need to act locally, understanding the requirements of the bioregions, understanding the cultural and economical and environmental aspects of this concrete place, and encourage people to take the responsibility for their lives. That's why we are addressing cities, and we are asking them what are the issues in their cities, how they manage to cope with those challenges, huge amount of challenges which we face each day. Our dear colleagues mentioned these difficult situations. I myself in this difficult situation because I was raised and born, and I lived almost all my life on the border with the Russian and Ukraine, and I understand the awfulness of all this situation. But I also understand that only people on this territory are capable to find solutions, to reconcile, to come from the self-identity of the representatives of nations, come to the identity of representatives of planetarians, of earthlings, of people who are responsible for their lives, for their land, despite of all the politicians who are doing all awful stuff. We need to reconcile. We need to find solutions in order to nurture our land, in order to bring flourishing to the whole planet. So I would like to finish with the words of the famous German philosopher Martin Heidegger, who famously said, "To dwell is to garden." So I think it's really important for us, for each dweller in each territory, in each city, in each village, to approach to our living as to gardening, to nurture the places where we live, to bring value to the people and to the places and to the planet. And identifying ourselves as planetarians, I am sure that we would be able to solve lots of problems, thinking systemically, feeling cosmically, but acting locally at the places where we live and at the places what we love. So thank you.
Thank you, Marina. I like the fact that you said, think global, act local. And where do we have the most agency to act local? In our own lives. Of course, we can do all your things, but I think, you know, as you were talking, I had this kind of vision of a car, right? And if we really want to build a great car, you got to have great components. And so I think out of your, you know, as much as we could do all these wonderful things, even as Living Cities Earth or Weaver, every component needs to be great. And so I'm saying, if we're going to do this, if we're going to make our world, you know, change this trajectory, Gian talked to us about, is like, can we take that responsibility? And I'm really speaking to myself here and to all of us in this room and those listening, and because one of you said it's a human condition, right? We are that first denominator that we can change. And so the challenge becomes, can we go and do that? And out of, you know, when we're feeling confident and happy and again, that happiness, like you said, it's relative, right? So I thought about it as the theory of relativity, because it's depending on where you are, depending on what the environment is offering you, you've got to adjust your sails. And that makes so that you're happy. It's not the environment that changes, it's you, right? And so how do you view the space you're in and the people you're with, and et cetera, et cetera. So thank you so much for giving us that wonderful food for thought. And so with that, I want to invite Bong. And you said something also very important, Marina. You were saying, like, you know, we shouldn't be looking at ourselves in all these different parts and divisions and things like that. And at the same time, as a body, I saw one of the people in the audience had put down about that we're a body. At the same time, when my toe is hurting, I don't really take care of the whole body. I'm busy like checking out what's happening with this toe. Like my tooth was hurting this week. It was a heck of an experience, man. So what I'm saying is, and I focus solely on that tooth. So I'm saying, Bon, could you talk to us? Because there are humans in the world that have experienced very difficult situations. And it's easy for us to say, sometimes from privileged positions, oh, I mean, we should forget about it. We should, you know, forgive and move on and et cetera, et cetera. Now, how does ensuring equity and just value exchange contribute to environmental sustainability and resilience? In other words, that we remember, we address the pain. And as you're doing that, can you think about examples practically where you actually see successful initiatives that are actually doing that? So first talking about why it's important and addressing that, and then what kind of examples do we have that we could perhaps look at?
Thank you for the question. Social equity is important to sustainable development because you know, at some fundamental level, they're all focused on the same thing, which is positive quality of life. At least that's my personal insight. That's what's driving the work that Young Moon is doing, my firm, and that the Zero Emission Consortium is doing. That social equity is crucial to sustainable development because, you know, at the end of the day, these two constructs, social equity, sustainable development, they're all focused on the same thing, positive quality. And as you've heard from many, if not all, of the previous speakers, they've touched on some aspect of what positive quality of life could mean at the micro level, meso level, and macro level. And you know, we're focused on the opportunities to contribute to the ambition of cities, especially in the global south, and especially cities that aren't traditional investment centers like the New Yorks, South Africas, Kenyas of the world. And the way we do that is by foregrounding issues of gender equity, issues of indigenous development and indigenous intellectual property, agency of marginalized people, so that both in defining local sustainable development problems and in defining what the solutions ought to be to those problems, you know, in both of those phases, we're making every effort that is feasible for marginalized communities to be involved, and not just in a consultative basis, but in all the substantive ways that they could be meaningfully engaged. So you know, that's the primary answer to your question that you posed. You know, why is social equity crucial to sustainable development?
Bong, you know, I remember, I think I might have mentioned this to you. I remember once we had a 4-hour conversation where I talked about something that I learned in Africa. So as I've mentioned, I was originally from South Africa, and I even though my background was not African, so very often I didn't understand some of the African the things they would do. And I moved to the north once in South Africa, and I remember all these people were constantly stopping me and saying "Sawubona," mama, you know. And I was like, just like bring up my stuff, like, hi, you know, but they were not interested in this. They wanted me to stop. Because what you're also saying here is what Sabona says, which is, I see you. You know, and the other person responds and says, I make myself available to be seen. So what I'm saying here is that this journey that we have to do together, right? You talked about this equity, and it's not equality. It is equity. It is seeing another human and allowing them to have the freedom to cultivate the happiness they need to contribute at their best. Because that best is in order,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So share with me examples that you've experienced around the world where this is actually happening and how that is affecting the humans that are contributing.
Sure. I would say that our Tech Flattens the Curve initiative is one of the highlights of our work thus far. That initiative is it's a reaction to the pandemic. When COVID hit, that pandemic sucked out all the energy, all the oxygen in the proverbial room, so to speak. All the investors that we were talking to, all of a sudden, their attention turned towards public health, and rightfully so. This was a very traumatic pandemic that impacted every sector of society. It shut down everything. And so it makes sense that everyone's attention was laser focused on it. And so what I found myself trying to figure out is how can we contribute to this pandemic response? And number two, how can we draw back attention on the work we're doing? And so Tech Flattens the Curve was born. And it's designed to address 4 curves of vulnerability. It's designed to flatten, to borrow a term from public health, it's designed to flatten 4 curves of vulnerability: food insecurity, energy insecurity, water insecurity, and social inequality.
So in other words, it's a way to help us heal the wounds, right?
Absolutely. At least we'd like to think so. And when we launched this in September or October of 2020, one of the first things that we focused on is where is the first win? And to make a long story short, we focused on where a lot of stakeholder attention was already focused on, where we had strong networks established already. And that led us to not just Southeast Asia in general, because there's a lot of attention on that region, both for its vulnerability to the pandemic, but also because of its vulnerability to the human impacts of climate change.
And we do have a responsibility now, right? Because we've contributed to that happening, and these people now have this fallout to deal with. So it's not really just only their problem, but all of our problem.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. Bob.
So the result of the successes of the Tech Flattens the Curve initiative is that we're now in 23% of all provinces across the Philippines. We've engaged city governments, and by foregrounding social equity, we've been able to present ourselves as a partner for city governments in the work that they get to do in vis-a-vis sustainable development.
Awesome. So I hope that those listening and hopefully will listen in the future will reach out and connect with you and see how we do this together. And also, Bong, I invite them to listen in the next part of the session we're doing, because you're going to be sharing as well about some of the actual infrastructure solutions that we bring and is coupled into this initiative you talk about. So thank you so much, Bong, for sharing. I'd like to turn to Nate now, Nate Whitestone. And Nate, it was, you know, what Bong had talked about, all this equity and how we needed to look at that. But that goes a little bit further, right? As in, it's one thing to do the little patch up jobs of, okay, trying to fix it on the ground with all these different initiatives, but it's also, there's something to be said about shifting the power, because that's the true box behind all the challenges, right? That just value exchange that is at the heart of our communities now. So what strategies can we implement, do you think, to ensure that environmental decision-making processes are inclusive and equitable, and considering these kind of diverse perspectives and voices? And how can we redefine these power dynamics in our society? Because they're totally out of balance now, right? And so that we can provide these environments where sustainability, where equity, where all of this can flourish. So talk to me about this, Nate, because this is at the heart of your work. You are beautiful. So in Living Cities Earth, we call it that, beautiful.
Yeah, I don't have the power to speak. So yeah, we do need to talk about power. And I want to go a little bit deep and try to be comprehensive about how we're talking about power here. So I will come back to the answers to the questions you just raised, Ferial, but first I want to talk about this thing that you brought up in the beginning, the polycrisis. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen. So there's a world that we all want to live in. You know, here's that photo again that Andy was talking about before. So I want to invite you to have somewhere in the back of your mind your own sense of the world that you want to live in. But the polycrisis is the thing that's happening right now that kind of interferes with this world that we might want to be living in. And I love this cartoon, which came out during the the middle of the COVID crisis that Bong was just talking about. Here, we can handle this, just wash our hands. And then, but in the background, there's the major economic disruption of Brexit. And of course, then that's going to be swamped by climate change, and biodiversity collapse is just coming right down the road behind it. So this polycrisis has a lot of different dimensions. And I'm just going to look at a few of these and how they're connected to each other so that we can come back to talking about how power relates to this polycrisis. So we're aware that biodiversity drives the greenhouse effect, and that greenhouse effect drives climate change, and climate change drives biodiversity loss. So these things are each reinforcing each other in really an unfortunate cycle. And when we relate to this situation, a lot of the time we feel scared. And appropriately so, because this is a scary cycle to be faced with. And what do we do when we see this kind of scary situation in the world? Well, for a lot of us, a lot of the time, we look at the situation and we say, this is too big for me to handle. There's nothing I can do about all this. I might as well look after me and mine. So then we take action, but the things that we do, looking after ourselves and the people we care about most, then drive biodiversity loss. They drive the greenhouse effect. These 5 threats to biodiversity, changing land and sea use, pollution, exploitation of species, these are all things that come from these very understandable responses to a scary world. And this situation is true for many other cycles of crisis. So, we can see the impact in biodiversity, but poverty, migration, and conflict have a similar dynamic. Conflict drives poverty, poverty drives migration, migration drives conflict. This is scary. So we, reinforce our borders. We reinforce, local police forces. We fund dictators. These kinds of things then drive the very things that we're scared of. And the same is true for oppression or suppression of minorities, the increase in inequality, increase in social discord, propaganda to reinforce order, loss of trust in institutional information, dangerous disorder, and on and on and on. So this is the dynamic of toxic power. So toxic power is helplessness and selfishness, or fear and greed, in action. There's nothing I can do about this. There's the helplessness. I might as well look after me and mine. There's the selfishness, or fear and greed, if you're an economist. So toxic power, it's what we do when we're looking for a short-term, small-scale solution to a problem that's larger than we know how to deal with immediately. Unfortunately, we end up disempowering ourselves and others. That's when we invest in extractive industries and discount the impact on communities and ecosystems as externalities. It's when we invest in governance systems that disempower the majority of participants. And because it disempowers us in the long term, it's addictive. We have to do more and more. Toxic power. So a lot of my colleagues, well, actually, I would say that all of my colleagues in livingcities.earth, and this is why I consider it to be a privilege to be a co-founder of livingcities.earth. Every one of my colleagues that I have met, worked with, interacted with, is investing their life into the practice of healthy power. But they also are bringing pieces of the puzzle that could be considered to be technical solutions to this meta crisis. And some people today say, well, there is no technical solution. And I'd say, nah, actually, there are technical solutions. So, we need radical change to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Can we do that kind of radical change? Yes, of course we can. Every major technological shift follows an exponential growth curve. You might think that it's impossible to go from zero to everywhere overnight, but railroads, internet commerce, mobile phones, all of these things have already followed those growth curves. Solar and wind are following them right now, and batteries and hydrogen electrolysis are coming down the pipe, and they're going to have this kind of growth curve in the future. So we don't have time to even come close to looking at all the different dimensions of the polycrisis, but I just want to say there are technical solutions and they can go everywhere overnight. However, if we apply these using the strategies of toxic power, we will just reinforce the polycrisis. So what we need is a transformative way of engaging with the polycrisis, engaging with the challenges and aspirations that we all share, and transforming how power works in our organizations, our communities, and in our lives. So, toxic power, healthy power. Now, there's a manifesto that we wrote about 10 years ago, some allies that I had the pleasure of working with, called the Healthy Power Manifesto. So I'm just going to read this aloud, go through it. We face a profound choice: to continue with the ways of toxic power which we inherited, or to build a world together where power is healthy for all. We all love power. We all suffer from toxic power. Healthy power is circular, not linear or flat. Healthy power is fluid, not frozen. Healthy power is consensual, not coercive. Healthy power is the ability to do work over time in a way that is good for all the people and systems involved. The ecosystems, the human communities, the customers, the workers, the investors, the leaders, all of us. Healthy power is not an alternative. It is our future. The future is here. We have numerous models of healthy power. If you are committed to bringing healthy power to your workplace or your community, you are already leading the shift to a world where power works for everyone. It can be done. It must be done. We are doing it, and we invite you to join us. So, can I have a time check, Ferial? I just want to, there's more that I want to go into. I want to go into some of the details here.
I would love for you to go into those details, but you're unfortunately going to have to start to wrap up. So I don't know exactly what your time is right now, but try to keep it succinct if you can. But at the same time, go for it.
Okay, absolutely. So the bit that I want to zoom in on here comes into this thing of healthy power is circular, not linear or flat. It is fluid, not frozen, and it is consensual, not coercive. And lastly, that it's good for all the people and systems involved. So if you think about your experience of toxic power in the workplace, or maybe in school growing up, maybe you got a message that you don't matter, your contribution doesn't matter. So we all know what toxic power is like. And we probably have all had experience of working in a team where we were really valued, totally valued, and we were able to contribute in a way that increased the power and well-being of everybody that we were working with. And that is healthy power. But we can zoom in a little bit and say that when we say circular, not linear or flat, there's this myth of the heroic CEO. That this myth or of the saint, or this idea that there's this figure who has the answers, and we just need to fall in line with that person. That's linear power. There's another myth, which is that we can all be the same. And you're screwing up this utopia of flat power if you take the lead. Both of those myths cause damage. What we need is the ability to influence each other, to lead and be led. And when we're in a system where we can both lead and be led, whether it's a good conversation or a sociocratic organization, there we have circular power. Now, when we say that it's fluid, not frozen, we're all aware of aristocracies. And unfortunately, the global 1% or 0.001% is frozen power, where people have power that just persists, and it's not situational. People can't step into leadership roles and out again as appropriate. Whereas when healthy power shows up, people can step into a leadership role and step out again in different circumstances. People can, I can be led by my children, and I often am. And they are often led by me. So we have fluid power between us. And lastly, healthy power is consensual, not coercive. So in sociocratic organizations like livingcities.earth, we consent to delegation. We consent to our policymaking. We opt in to the influence that people have over us. We're not forced to play the game. Now, I'm sure we're very familiar with many organizations, states, et cetera, where coercion is the way that we get involved, and coercion is how we stay involved. So healthy power, again, is consensual, not coercive. So yes, I hear you. I'll fast forward to the end here. So we don't have time to go through all of the examples, very real world examples of healthy power that are out there. We don't have time to talk through all the elements here, and we don't have time to talk about the details of decision-making processes that can enable you to bring healthy power into your organization or community. But I want you to know that help is out there if you do want help, and we're happy to share this slideshow with folks in the future if they want access to these resources. Thank you very much.
Nate, that was absolutely insightful. And now you understand why I love working with these people, right? Because they're so smart and so awesome. And to be honest, you know that we struggle with power regardless of whether we know all this stuff, right? So what I'm saying here is that we still our governments are trying their best. I mean, they're doing stuff, organizations, companies trying to fix things, but the stuff is going wrong and it's not hitting the mark, and we're not hitting those net zero targets, and we're not, because we have power struggles going on and its power is out of control. So I invite them, everybody listening here, please let us help our governments. Not that we have the answer. Nate, you said something important, being a learner and a teacher all at the same time. Living Cities Earth, you know that we're going to go in there not to tell you what to do, like Marina said, but to learn alongside you, because we need good examples. So I'm going to invite you, please reach out and join us. And I want to invite Marilyn. Thank you so much, Nate. But Marilyn, if what Nate's talking about, if there is no capacity to empower individuals to be able to contribute in communities, like what he was just talking about, then we still have a big problem. So how can we? I mean, you've spent your entire work life really thinking about this subject and writing books about it and sense making. So how can we build capacity for individuals, groups, organizations, and communities to inquire and impact their city well-being?
So thanks for that very valuable question, Ferial. Of course, cities contain all of those levels of humanity: individuals, leaders, teams, organizations, sectors, communities. And I was led to look at the city as a complex, adaptive living system. And so many of the frameworks that we're now using in Living Cities Earth started out with my work in Integral City. And I'm a radical optimist, so I believe from the beginning that it's possible for humans to actually learn what it takes to live on this planet in a very healthy way. And that's partly because of something that I heard from James Lovelock, who was the physicist who said that the Earth is a living system. So let me just share a few slides with you, and let me track where I have taken this, if I can find my slide. There we go. So what happened with listening to James Lovelock was that he said that after listening to the kinds of challenges that Nate has just summarized for us, an interviewer said, "I guess you don't have a very healthy or positive perspective on humans." And James Lovelock said, on the contrary, humans are Gaia's reflective organs. I was so amazed that he would say this, because that meant to me that we actually had an evolutionary path that had brought us to where we are, and that we had an evolutionary responsibility to take the evolutionary purpose that we're designed for. I think that Gaia, our planet, asks us to care for herself as the planet, for places, for people, for persons. And when Marina was talking, she was reminding us that Jude Currivan had recoined what Patrick Geddes had said in the 1890s. He was the one that said, "Think global, act local." But Jude has taken it to think cosmically and feel globally and act locally. And that is really how I feel that it's possible for us to notice how to build capacity. So the capacity that I see being built in the systems that we're looking at when we think of a city is that I call them place caring. So place caring is about looking at the intentions and the values and vision that humans bring to the city. So a number of people have already spoken about the need for us to consider the importance of intentions. And I see that as being very vital to any way that we are able to care for self, others, place, and planet. What we usually focus on when we're thinking about cities and building is place making. And so that really embraces action and systems and strategies. But in fact, when we look at this slide, it's really a picture of an integral view, a perspective that's holistic. And so place caring of intentions, of values, and vision really is not going to be very effective if we're not able to ground it in the placemaking of action and systems and strategies. Whereas if we think of the action and systems and strategies, they're going to be completely out of the context of understanding that it's not about ego or ethnocentric or even regional centric perspectives, but that cities need to take a perspective that is truly global, that is Gaia-centric. So when I'm looking at building capacity in cities, in Integral City, we built 5 different maps. And I know that the viewers cannot see all the details on these maps. But there's 5 because I found that they shapeshift from one to another, and that they are all, in effect, fractal views of how humans are, as Gaia's reflective organs, able to work individually and collectively, internally and externally, as we look at the individual map. That we think about ourselves in nested holarchies, not hierarchies that are dominator, but they're holarchies that naturally evolve like humans, like living systems. That we also realize that it is individuals that we're across our lifetimes are developing, and that we are able, when we work together in teams and then see how our agencies and organizations are all parts of the city, that the city includes people at every stage of development, and we need to have enough compassion and wisdom to hold the sword of compassion with the sword of wisdom. And we need, when we do that, to recognize that we have, across our evolution on this planet, evolved not only ourselves and our brains, but the organizations and the patterns in which we interact together. There is a center map that really is driving the center of all of these different ways of thinking about the city, and that's the map of spirituality. I think of this as quite an involutionary and evolutionary process where we are actually sourced from love, from spirit, from consciousness, so that science these days is saying and recognizing we're not sourced from matter. We're actually sourced from consciousness, and it's out of this consciousness of the capacity for beauty, truth, and goodness through grace and place and space to evolve ourselves in an ever more complex way back to reconnect and know that we are part of a unity, part of oneness. So when I'm thinking about how to develop capacity in cities, I look for what I call the 4 voices of the human hive. I've often thought about cities and learned through biomimicry from the beehive, and that I've learned that there are not only the 4 roles in the beehive, but these correspond to 4 voices in the city. The citizens, the civic managers, the business innovators, and civil society. And so when I'm looking at building capacity in cities, I always want to bring this whole system into the room. There is also the +1, because if we think for any given city, there are these 4 voices. Any of the cities in its own bioregion or that it's relating to across the planet is the +1, another fracture, another hologram of a city that can become either a friend or, as Marina was pointing out, these days sometimes they are neighbors who are not friendly at the moment, and that impacts the whole context of how we look at the capacity to build in cities, to build capacity for individuals, for persons, for places, and the planet itself. There are all kinds of technologies, as Nate and Bong and others have pointed to, but there's a very simple way of looking at these different perspectives of intentions and values and the actions and the systems, and we can measure them and notice whether they're correlated with one another or whether they're interacting well together, and it can show us which areas that we need to concentrate on to develop them from less capacity into more. Oftentimes when I'm taking the kinds of mesh scan perspectives of a city, I see that they may have individual strong perspectives that show us that people are happy and willing to learn, but they're not working very well together. And so one of the things that they need to do is to learn how to develop care for each other and develop those relationships. As Nate and others have pointed out, we also need to live in very healthy ways, not only through acting, but also through our whole nutritional and biospheric expression. because the city is not only a biosphere, but also it's a social sphere. It is bio-psycho-cultural social reality, and we need to have a perspective that our holism isn't just parts, but these are all interacting together all the time. I have this as a little sample analysis of an eco-village, but it could apply to a city of any scale. It could go right up to a megalopolis. Although these days I am thinking very much about the capacity in cities, and that there may be something such as a right size for cities, which is going to take us into some very challenging, but I think evolutionary perspectives of how we as collectives, as Gaia's reflective organs, can be of greatest care for her. I will just skip over these two slides, which show how we can ask people very simple questions to discover the data that I had in the previous slide. And to show even here a very simple chart that shows us the strengths of a city because of the way that people respond to the different levels of complexity and how they're working together, the blocks that are preventing us from becoming the greatest capacity that we could be. And we're also generally always able to see, if we were mayor for a day, what would we say would be the changes that we would see our city should most take. So in this very simple way, we can use both qualitative and quantitative measures. And the last slide I want to share is a way of thinking about aligning not only the place caring, because when we do the place caring, we actually are able to create the value that we can then, when we want to both make and act in cities, we can realize that value and build the cities that will support us in the fullness of our humanity. And that the last practice I would share with all of us here is there is such a thing as a Karma Yoga. And the Karma Yoga is very simple. It simply says, in order to build the greatest capacity for Gaia and her reflective organs, we must first care for ourselves so that we can care for others. And together we can care for our places. And all together we can care for our beloved planet. So, Ferial, that's what I have to say in a quick snapshot about the possibilities and the directions of being able to develop capacity, both for our planet and for all of our living cities on it. Thank you.
Wonderful, so powerful, Marilyn. Thank you for sharing. You know, the one part of it that stood out for me was we are part of oneness, yet we live in these fractal ways, right? And so it is that journey back to who we are. It's in us. We know how to do this.
It is, absolutely. And you know, when we think about how many different ways we can care for each other, we then can really glory that we are humaning well together for aliveness with love. Those are all aspects of actually caring for one another.
And you live it, Marilyn. You embody that. And I say that, I get emotional in this moment because we don't see each other. We don't see each other. And what if we did? What if we understood you're a part of me and I am a part of you? And we're
Yes.
beautiful. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and we're part of Gaia, and she's beautiful, and she's a part of me. You know, so I just I want to invite Yuri, and as you've just shared about how do we care for ourselves, for others, for our oneness. And so Yuri, if you're there, you and I love the work of Otto Scharmer and his theory U, right? And he often refers to this disconnect that we as humans experience. So I'd like to ask you to talk about, because Marilyn just mentioned we are one, yet the way we experience life often is in such isolation. So tell us more about this and why you think it's necessary that we address this connect. I know a lot of what you love to do is make the invisible visible. And this invisible thing that pulls us apart, right, is there. We feel it. We can't often respond to it the way we probably need to. So sense make it a little bit for me about what is this?
Yeah, so I had no idea what I'm going to talk about, like Andy, before, even before like as I was listening, and then Nate came with his beautiful slides. I don't have any slides.
You
I
don't
should
need
have
slides
slides,
because you're creative.
but I made slides. I made slides.
I was
And
joking.
and I was using AI and what I heard to make the slides.
These are local
So
AI genius.
yeah, they were just made as you were talking. And I want to speak about the human disconnect, reconnecting with humanity. And I just, just to mention the image on the right, I asked whatever the AI creator to the human disconnect. That was the image that came. Which I think it's pretty good. And I just want to share, the work of Otto Scharmer and Thierry Yu. So they speak about ecological divide, three divides: social divide, spiritual divide, and so the ecological divide is this disconnect between self and nature, and how we are like disconnecting and actually actively destroying nature on a global scale. Social divide, which is self and other, and it's connected with the kind of social economical, the have and the have not. And the spiritual divide, this was between self and self, between who we are or were and who we could be. And in Theory U, there is a lot about discussion about the source. What is the thing beyond this? And how should we respond to those challenges? And I'm coming to this realization that what if all these three divides are not even separate? They're a single divide, and that there is a story to that three divides, that they are actually could be named as disconnection, global disconnection. And this is a little experiment that I did using state and transition modeling, which is from ecology studies, to human culture. And here you see about original culture or indigenous or First Nation beliefs. And you see human as a community, nature as a mother self, and nature connected culture. And this cycle that has been for many millennia and generations, and still is going on in some parts of the world, thankfully, then got disrupted into what we call now development, which somewhere in the culture something came around nature as a resource. So nature is not anymore a mother or self, and human over nature culture emerges as the human development and economical development kind of grow. And then we arrive to the current moment and the ecological limits, and the human crisis, the cultural disruptions, the wars, the polarization, and the connection here. And the question is, where do we go from here? And there is, of course, the forces that wants to go back, either go back to the kind of the New Agers or the Trumpists, to go back. But of course, going back is not really possible. So I feel the way forward, and this is maybe the way forward, that Living Cities Earth and other movements are searching for that missing feedback loop, which leads to this Earth as a shared home, Earth citizenship and regenerative culture as a new kind of dynamic state for human culture and consciousness, possibly. And I want to go back to this idea of human disconnect and what is the cost of that. First of all, on the human cost and the personal cost. So this is numbers before COVID. So nearly 1 billion people, including 40% of the world's adolescents, were living with mental disorder. So this is before COVID, and before the growing wars, and chronic prediction indicate depression to be the leading cause of disease burden by 2030. And finally, depression and anxiety cost the global economy $1 trillion a year. And I want to focus on this aspect, and again, looking at the three divides in terms of disconnection from self, as a symptom of it is lack of self-awareness and a hopeless attitude. So I don't know if you notice that around you or in yourself. And disconnect from others, the symptoms could be lack of community ties and sense of isolation. The disconnect from nature, lack of contact with nature, the body and the senses. So all of our senses are physical expression of nature that we are, and the responses we can find to that. So I've been exploring through theater. So I've been a soldier in a war, very continuous, and what helped me was theater and nature and storytelling. But I feel we all have our way to reconnect. And my question for you, and you can answer in the chat or in other way, what are the activities and places you reconnect with self, others, and nature? That was my slides that I made quite quickly. Thanks for the inspiration I got from here. And I would love to hear more from Ferial. What reconnects you? And I'll stop sharing so I can see you.
That is some of the challenge, right? Where some of the work I do with Andy and Gian and people like that over the last decade has really been challenging my own heart, as in, how do you maintain your dynamic balance? So to me, it really is, you brought it all the way back to our own personal, we kind of took this journey here together and all the way back to our personal happiness. And I don't think I can be good at what I do here if I'm stressed out, if I cannot feed my family, if I cannot, if I'm not healthy, if I'm not. So really, it is so vital that I invest into putting on my own life jacket. Because when I do, I become someone that can actually offer you something, right? Can offer my friends in this call something, can offer Living Cities Earth as a community, can offer my city, can offer the world something of value. I am already valuable, and I know this, but the bottom line is, if that value is being challenged by incapacity, which is this unhappiness, right? This not contentment, let's put it that way. And so for me, it's really, we very often in the linear brain, you want to go, I got to do this and that and that and that. And we cause more stress for ourselves because we're right. Because we're like, oh my gosh, I have to meditate. Oh my gosh, I have to speak with Gaia. Oh my God. Oh my gosh, you're stressing the hell out of me at this point. So what I'm saying is, can we do, and believe you me, I've been there, so I'm speaking from experience. So over these last years, it was about centering into my own person. You said coming back home, understanding who is Ferial. I moved out to the beach. I live at the beach in Scotland. It's not a beach you want to swim, but I'm not a beach swimmer. I like to watch the beach, right? I like to be next to it. And this brings me so much life. I'm not far from the city, but I have forest around me, and it's like I can just now and then go and hug a tree, right, and stand there. But I don't go into it every day because I don't have the time. I have to run Living Cities Earth, right? I also love to cook, so this is the ways in which I do. I'm a singer. There are moments I just start to write songs or start to do things. So what I'm trying to say here is, it's about finding what makes you slow down, what makes you tap into those spaces that make you happy. It's not about applying a formula. So one of you said, we need to sense into, I think it was Andy, who's like, we need to sense into what is needed. And that is the same sensing that we have to do together for our planet, for our city, for our family, and for ourselves. What do you need? How do you need to adjust your sails in order to have that happiness? And at the heart of our work, Yuri, is this. It's not how and we've got all these fancy things, right? We've got all these infrastructure things, and you saw Nate's was phenomenal, right? We got all these insights. The stuff that Marilyn had just shared, but in the end, they all come down to that space, if we can find that. So that's my answer for you, and I'm hoping, because I that's not a prepared answer, that's just my response, right? So yeah, is that what you want?
I love this, and I feel that that's the question we can all be asking ourselves continuously, and we can help each other asking this question. what reconnects us. And can we create a society where reconnection is what we do, is our job, is our main job. And right now is to go back to alignment.
To be one.
Yeah, and that's a job, that's a work, is we're not being educated this way because there's a lot of forces that are pushing us away from that. So there is work behind it.
How are we running our businesses, right? And our organizations? Are we trying to fulfill the bottom line here? I remember having a meeting with Bong Vergara, a while ago, and we had this kind of agenda, and it ended up being a 4-hour just connection thing. It didn't get to the agenda, but the bottom line is, like, he's my absolute bro, and we can, now what we do together has established such a trust for us, a basis, right? So there's something about what that I think we really need to get back to. And with that said, Yuri, thank you for sharing. I appreciate you. And I appreciate every one of these people that have shared, and just want to say thank you to those of you who have listened so beautifully and intently to us. I mean, I didn't feel the 2 hours go past right now because it was so engaging with each of you. Thank you. And one of the reasons I think you're these incredible human beings, among the incredible human beings around the world, who absolutely can help us in this moment sense make through a very complex, difficult time in our history. Well, actually, I say that and realize, well, hasn't it always been complex and difficult? And maybe it's just our latest version of it that we're experiencing, right? So with that said, we're just going to take a 2-minute break real quick. And we just want to thank everybody who has been listening. I'm Ferial Puren, and I've been your host today. And I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and have been inspired by it. But if you return with us, we're going to have another 2-hour session where we're going to talk about the actual solutions that these phenomenal human beings have imaginated, right? And how we can actually bring that to actually helping you, your city, your business, your family, etc. Thank you. And we'll see you in 2 minutes. Are we still live? Are we taking our 2 minutes, Asina?
Yes, you are live
Okay,
with the holding slide and a message to be back in 2 minutes.
thank you.
You're live. You might want to mute yourself, folks.
And we are back after our 2-minute break. So hi again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself in the world right now. I just want to say thank you for everybody who's just been listening so intently before. And especially to those who've been sharing, my co-founders in Living Cities Earth. Thanks, you guys have been total stars, and yeah, just for sticking around for these past 2 hours. And now we'll head into our next two, where I just want to say welcome to those who are joining us right now. I'm Ferial Puren. I'm the CEO of Living Cities Earth, and today I'm also the facilitator of this session. And I'm joined by 8 of our co-founders in Living Cities Earth. And together we're exploring real solutions. Now, we've talked earlier about the condition we find ourselves, the environment we're in. We try to understand where we've come from, what's the journey that brought us here, and the complexities that we're dealing with. And then how do we, in this moment, find our personal, community, business, world dynamic balance. And part of that hopefully is found in these possible solutions, right, to these extinction level challenges humanity and our world is facing. And now that we have heard about all of those challenges, we want to just get a bit practical about this. And of course, the humans that I work with in Loving Cities Earth have been spending a lot of time sense making and coming up with these practical ways of actually dealing with this. And please understand, when I say this, we're not talking about the fact that we are coming with solutions that we think will work, because we discovered earlier on, this is us having a way too big an ego because how could we possibly think we could solve all of the challenges when we are also just operating from a knowledge deficit? So what we're actually inviting you into right now is to look at how we've sense made. What have we come up with, and how can we partner with you to learn with you? But we come to bring our gift of what we have to offer. So with that said, I'm going to invite, Gian was up earlier first, but I'm going to invite Gian again to talk about, he developed a program that we call SRG, right? It's a method that can be practically implemented to address some of these challenges. So it's a methodology. And I'd like to ask Gian to tell us anyway, a little bit more about that and how it could be applied in the work others are doing all around the world. Thank you, Gian.
Thanks, Ferial. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So all these great insights I've gotten from all the other speakers has kind of helped shape what I'm going to discuss as well. But I'm going to go back to the idea of evolution and especially the individual's evolution, our personal learning journey through life. We are evolving right now as we learn what others have to share with us. So we're constantly evolving. Our learning is evolving. But at the same time, that's intertwined with the cultural or civilizational evolution, because there's a feedback loops between each individual and the culture that each individual is a part of. So the cultural evolution, and especially what we humans call progress, is a focus of part of my research, and so the progress trap, the unintended consequences of progress, is one of the motivating factors for me to think about a simpler way to codify this process of progress, and especially the critical component of improvement, of human improvement, where we have things that already exist, cultural artifacts that already exist in our environment, but we find there's problems with them. So they're part of the mixed bag that we get whenever we develop interventions or solutions, whether they're physical artifacts or they're processes. We often we think of a solution, and I'm trying to right now to find another word for the dual pair of problem and solution, because I'm greatly influenced by Nora Bateson and her work on complexity, and it seems that there's a word begging to be born that transcends the problem solution dichotomy, because the problem solution dichotomy is basically looking at things in a non-holistic way, not treating systems, the complexities of systems that actually exist in most of the circumstances we deal with in life. So I'm actively looking for that new terminology. But Stop, Reset, Go was a process that was born out of this question of dealing with complexity and dealing with our common problem solution approach, and seeing if we're going to use reductionism to apply to the world. Is there a better way to do that? So Stop, Reset, Go really emerged as a simple 3-step process. It's kind of like cellular automata. That's a field of mathematics where you start with some very simple rules, and from those simple rules you can construct very complex permutations of behavior. So Stop, Reset, Go is a set of simple rules. There's the stop, the reset, and the go, and they're really about it's a sense making and a mapping tool that allows you to kind of put your problem into this 3-step process, breaking it down, and then articulating it in a graph. So the Stop, Reset, Go graph, where if there's a problem, the first thing you notice is there is a problem. The first step is noticing the problem. And if there's a problem, then there's often, with the idea of improvement, there's some aspect of some human system that has been designed that's desirable, it's fulfilling some useful function, but it's coupled with something that's usually an unintended consequence that's causing some kind of harm in the world. So the question that emerges then is, okay, I recognize there's a problem here. There's something here that we want, but there's also it comes with something we don't want. So is there a way of fulfilling that human need, but decoupling the unintended consequence from it? And so that's the stop process, that recognition. And the reset step is the next phase. It's like, okay, how can I decouple it? Can I try something? Can I run a test? Can I do a prototype? And so we try the test, we try the prototype, and we test it and see if it works. And if it does work, then the final step is, can we scale it? Can we apply it to the real world? And so that's really basically what Stop, Reset, Go is. It's really just codifying what we all do naturally as human beings when we encounter problems in life. And now, as you know, we're all embroiled in this multiple crises at different scales and different dimensions. So the Stop, Reset, Go tool is really useful because it allows anyone, it's kind of designed for anyone to use, and they can take it, and you can even use it just with pen and paper, but we're trying to develop it into a Web3 software ecosystem. But the whole principle is that you apply this process to any problem in your life, and by doing that, you can start mapping out the problem in these 3 simple steps. But by applying it iteratively, recursively, and at different scales and in different dimensions, you can generate a very complex map of all the problems that you face in your life, all the different dimensions of the problems you face. But the power comes when you work together with other people, because it's that diversity that actually, that's where the power lies, is because your perspective that this is a solution might miss something that somebody else will see. So by making it an open source system and encouraging as great as many people to participate as possible, the larger the number of participants and the greater the diversity, the more likely you're going to mitigate unintended consequences. So that in a nutshell is what Stop, Reset, Go is about. And we're trying to implement it now in a like I said, in a Web3 software ecosystem.
Again, that's amazing because I mean, I started out working with you, I think it's a decade ago now, and really implementing a lot of that. But it's, as you said, it's encouched in such deep systemic kind of work that has been done. It's the stuff that someone like Danella Meadows would say, in the sense of how do we transcend now in this moment our current paradigm, because that's the only way that you really bring change, deep fundamental change to a broken system. And as we've just talked about it now, there's so much that is now, we're dealing with the fallout of that, right? And how do we intervene? And it's this ability to stop, to reset, and to go. And it's been particularly profound in my own life, not even in just the work and everything else we do, but I have a word for you: evolution. I thought about it and I'm like, actually, that word exists. It's evolution, because we separated the problem from the solution, but really nature just, it's all incorporated, right? You build upon what you understand. So failure, there isn't a word like this. There is no word like failure. There's only learning. So I thank you. That's phenomenal. And I hope that in Living Cities Earth, we could really catalyze that and so much else that we do. And of course, next I'm going to be asking Andy Ferguson to share a little bit more about how we actually did that within the SRG journeys of it all. How did we build upon what you had helped us sense make around SRG, and we added the J. So please, Andy, tell us more about how why we conceived of what we did, and how it helps humans just navigate through this life with this complexity, this VUCA banning stuff, world we talk about, with grace, resilience, and the big idea of learning to human well together, as we do in Living Cities Earth.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. How do we SRG, stop, reset, go? And so the conversations between you, me, and Gian over many months, years. I think what we sussed out at some point was that when you witness a paradigm shift in someone else, and your paradigm shift is witnessed by other people, there's a connection there. Back to that thing I was talking about to begin with, the vulnerability, right? So we figured out, if we could take people on a journey where they would feel safe to demonstrate that they weren't sure what was going on, that they didn't understand what was going on, that they were incapable of even expressing what was going on, the group would, the fact of witnessing and sharing the witnessing was the key thing, because I can drop into cliche territory here, right? About together we achieve, together everyone achieves more. But that recognition that we have blind spots, that we have partiality, we don't know fully what's happening. We can't predict the future, although we can project into the future what we'd like to ideally see, to manifest what Gian was talking about, where we will prototype something that fails. And what we particularly focus on is that individual collective gestalt that Gian talks about, this experience of what is it like to transcend beyond the individual self and experience a collective. And that's really what we developed, and we explored something. I mean, each one of us brought something to the table, but I brought a sentence, or the beginning of a sentence, which came from my background as someone that's been involved with personal development for a long time, which relates to kind of what Maslow was driving at. But the sentence goes something like, for me to fully express myself and to complete myself and all its possibilities, I need to have a willing and capable community. and a favorable environment. And that idea that, you know, especially in Living Cities Earth, we focus on planet and place, I think, and a lot of the time with, if we take what Marilyn was talking about, I mean, that was a transformative moment for me. For example, a new model, this person, people, place, and planet. I thought, oh, that's really good. We had, before that, we had, for an individual to really thrive and develop fully their potential, they have to have this willing, so people have to want to, and they have to have the capability to support us. Alexander Laszlo's not here today, but Alexander yesterday was talking about this idea that we can fall back and know that we're going to be held, we're going to be caught. Yes. So we create that environment. And then we talk about the favorable environment as, you know, an ideal. And again, I just want to pull back and explain my background a little bit. I was a ski instructor in both Scotland and France. And the role of a ski instructor is to take people into an environment which can be potentially a lot of fun and exciting and rewarding, but can also be potentially lethal. You know, if you get it wrong, people die. And in my experience, you know, that happens more than people realize. So one of the things about being a ski instructor is that you're constantly aware of the environment and what the possibilities are within that environment. And then you're helping that group to develop their awareness and their ability to understand it and appreciate it and respect it, and then move within that safely to accomplish something they want to achieve. So SRG Journeys is built around this idea of how do we human well? How do we support one another? How do we communicate with, you know, the right information and the right energy and the right empathy and things? So we give them an experience. And I know Artie, who we've heard from, went through an SRG journey, and it opened up a whole new set of possibilities for her. So I think that's the key. It's a shared experience around something that's salient, as Gain would say, something that we can get our teeth into and explore and try and lean into and develop a solution to. But the actual point of it is to learn how to SRG well together, to stop, reset, go together.
Because Andy, this we realized it was so crucial, right? Because even, I mean, I'm not gonna go into the story right now, but I remember when I met you, I basically let you down, you know, and so that was a recipe right there for us to have have no relationship, or have a very strained relationship, or have what we do have, which is, you're one of my best friends in the world. And I seriously let you down on this day. But what happened in that moment is, when we decided to do, and we would have not developed SRG Journeys had we not had the ability to transcend our personal understandings of what happened, right? Because when we're in organizations trying to build these big things, trying to build these solutions, trying to bring stuff to the planet that cannot change things, if we don't build the basic capability to actually work together, and that means to be able to see another perspective, to be able to see someone else's perspective, which is not your own, and not to see their perspective as wrong, or yours is wrong, or theirs is right, but these are perspectives. And so we focus in on this with the SRG journey of it all, recognizing I'm actually going to hurt you. Like, we have an agreement. I'm going to hurt you, not because I want to, but because I don't have knowledge of certain things. I'm going to contravene. Like, there's this hidden contracts that I don't know I have with you. But because you walk with such grace, so over these years, we developed this grace. We tested it in our own relationship, and it is the biggest testimony we have, because it works. When there's tension, it is not because this person is trying to injure me. There is tension because there is information I don't have. And if I have grace for myself and with the other person, and I slow this down and I stop, and I reset, and I go, you can overcome pretty much every challenge in a relationship. And that is the relationships we have in all of life. The one we have with ourselves, with each other, with Gaia, with the animals, with the plants, with nature, with the sea, you name it. Right? So Gin, did you want to say something there? Because I felt like you were leaning forward. But the thing is, this is exciting for me, because if we're going to do this, if we're going to we want a world that is different, we sure as heck need to know how to do this. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been in organizations that just fall apart because we don't invest into understanding how to actually do this. And that's why we designed SRG Journeys. Gin, yes.
Yeah, I'll just say something quick. I was just typing something in the chat, but I'll just air it quickly. I just responding to what Andy said, I think said about failure, and we create this kind of dualistic language like succeed and fail, and then we apply it, human intentionality, we apply it to nature itself. But if evolution has just done its normal thing, and 99% of all species don't exist anymore. So that means, all the individuals, those species are gone. Is that a failure? And, when you apply that language, but so I think it's a part of the journey is also letting go and accepting, we do our best. It's we're human beings, we have intentionality, and other living organisms have intentionality as well, but we seem to prize ourselves as exceptional because of our cognitive abilities. But where has that exceptionality brought us, to this polycrisis? I mean, other species don't have polycrisis like we do. But just along that same line, is death a failure? Some transhumanists would say death is a failure. We must, a lot of researchers in transhumanism are trying to find that secret elixir to overcome that most dreaded disease of death. But if you look at, the great meditators of so many spiritual traditions, they've penetrated death. There's a deep understanding of what it is that helps them to let go, and they can demonstrate to other people in their culture that, what this letting go and accepting this quote failure is.
The rhythms of life, right? And the life we just talked about, and when we move on and transition, we're contributing to new life, to new expressions of life. And so we no longer have to be so fearful about the things that are dying. And let's just be honest. There are a bunch of things right now that need to die so that something new can evolve. Andy, you were getting excited.
I just want to say, it's the picture behind me, because this is relevant to you, Ferial, right? The picture behind me is the coast of Scotland. It was taken on Tuesday when I was doing a 15-mile pilgrimage across ancient pilgrim routes in Fife in Scotland.
Where I live.
Where you live, yeah, you're only about 30 miles away from where you live. And we ended up talking. I was talking to you just after I took this picture on this beach. But further up this beach, just behind where my head is, I discovered this place where Vikings had arrived about 1,500 years ago, right, and settled. And then about 1,000 years after that, some people from Denmark were shipwrecked there, and the locals just let them build a little village. And so this Viking settlement, which had fallen into disrepair, and then this Danish, same sort of people 1,000 years later, tented village had disappeared. There were signs out saying nature is finding a new home in the relics of what they left behind, right? And just as, this topic we're talking about, literally in that picture behind me is an example of nature repurposing a momentary human experience, right? And it's cyclical, because the Vikings arrived 500 years ago, and then 1,000 years after that, these other Danes arrived. And it's this beautiful idea of cycles and nature finding its own path, and just having the faith in that. And one of the great things, as I say, just earlier on this morning, I was talking to one of our co-founders, and she was talking about that, just giving in and letting go, and just trusting that it's going to find its way. But you still have to take action, which I think is where Bong and the others come in, right?
Exactly. It's not a passive, whatever is going to happen, because you have agency. So it is a dance, literally, with each other and with nature and with everything else around us, because it makes the life meaningful. they're just going to sit here like a couch potato and let everything, let life just happen, you're not going to have an enjoyable experience. That's not happy, right? So it really is about that, back to our dynamic balance. So thank you, you guys. I want to invite Marilyn because I think Marilyn's mesh scan also really helps us to gauge what you were talking about now is what is happening in our city. Are we, how do we address the things, right? That we individually challenged by, but then it's obviously the aspect of how does our individual challenges, how it has contributed to the cities we live in, and that's a whole different ball game that we've got to deal with. So you guys are talking about SRG journeys being very much centered around that individual endeavor, and now could we have an SRG journey for the city, right? And that's really essentially where Marilyn's mesh scan is coming. It's giving us the indicators for how do we do that on a city level. So please, Marilyn, share about your work. So before you share, sorry, I would say that you've heard what Andy had just shared. So it's a technology. It's not a course. So if any of you have any ideas out there, we could take this technology, input it into any course or idea you have, and create that experience for the human, that transcendent experience. So please, Marilyn, explain this to us, because I think the mesh scan helps us do that in the city.
Yes, thanks, Ferial. It's operating at a completely different scale, but it's fractal. So it's deriving its intelligences from the same kinds of frameworks that Jen's talking about. I'm always delighted to hear the reference to either of the Batesons, but particularly Nora these days, and the ways that she's able to look at living systems through eyes that are really appreciating the deep life in them. So I'm going to share my screen again and just quickly show people how I have thought about taking a look at the city through responses from people who are asked to just answer some relatively simple questions about the city that they live in. So, so as you mentioned, the technology I'm talking about is the mesh scan. And the mesh scan was created probably about 10 or 15 years ago in its first versions. You can go online and take it yourself. So there's a version that's set up here. I would normally have people take it from a human habitat that is defined. But for being able to look at something just as an example, it's possible to look at this. So it has a way of integrating some of the things I already talked about when I spoke earlier. It integrates the 4 voices. It aligns dialogue, the 12 intelligences of the integral city. It looks at inquiries for vision and local place plans. And it's using not only integral but spiral dynamics, and it assesses all the holarchies that are built into your city that I was pointing to in the maps I was looking at. And it also includes discovering what is the change state of your city, whether it's quite a happy city or in the process of mild change or deep change or coming out of a change that it's just recently recovered from. So when we look at this, as I mentioned, it has the 4 voices of the city, and I particularly like to be able to speak to the citizens, the civic managers, the business innovators, and the third sector civil society together, so that we can take this whole system and appreciate how their wholeness works together. So the first part of the mesh scan is looking at the human habitat and some of the demographics that you reveal about yourself. So here's some data that has just been collected from a small group of people who are living in more than one city. So you can see that this was actually a scan of a number of cities, and that we're looking at things like one would normally think about having to look at the population of a city to get its basic demographics. So we also look at age and gender. We looked at marital status, the number of people in households, because again, this is really something that's changing quite frequently these days, and it is very culturally, it varies culturally. So the ways that we also think about the city is it's a context in which we're actually traveling multiple places for multiple reasons. And so one of the issues that we have to look at in cities is how are we using energy. And so one of the things that it's good to know is how far we have to travel. Many people have probably heard of the 15-minute city, and this is the kind of data that underlies finding out, do we have all the essential services that we would expect in a city within a 15-minute radius of where we're living. So we also, when I look at cities, I look at the languages that are spoken, because I do use language as a proxy for the culture. And it also starts to show us, if this were one city, look at the number of languages. Well, I know that Toronto, since I'm Canadian, that I was aware a number of years ago, I think Toronto had the most languages spoken in any city, and that was, at that time, over 200 languages in Toronto alone. And so this kinds of cultural divides are something that give us both the possibility of division, but also the possibility of great richness, because every language gives us a different perspective of being able to appreciate life. One of the things I do with the mesh scan is I also ask people to rank the statements that describe them most, give them 3 statements, and this again also gives us a perspective of the personalities and how they see themselves. And this helps us to be able to notice even levels of complexity and how neighborhoods and individuals may or may not be able to work together. It also helps us to translate the feedback to them in the language that the statements they choose tell us that they would like to hear. The first section after the demographics is showing personal priorities, what matters most to me, so that we get a perspective that starts with the individual. Then we ask the individual, when I'm under stress, what do I tend to do? So whether, it's becoming defiant or maneuvering strategically or returning to my roots, praying that our faith will see us through, joining with others, do what I can to flow with the turbulence, surviving day by day with the bare necessities, and fighting for the good of all life on the planet. So there's that variety of responses to stress. We also ask people, you heard me mention in the last presentation that if you were mayor for a day, what would you dream of doing? And so we ask people to establish what do they dream of most in their life, and what voice of the city do they use most. So in looking at the 4 voices of the city, many of us are speaking from more than one voice. It could be the citizen and the city manager, but we also might have a private business on the side, and we could also excuse me, speak of the voice of the civil society or the third sector. When we go on beyond personal perspectives, then we're looking at the family and the neighborhood. So the family and the neighborhood also goes through the same kinds of priorities. So this is a different fractal, a different scale. So we look under the difference between a personal response to stress and a family response to stress can be very interesting. We also move from the family into the work and activity places. So notice that these days, many people are not just working for money, but they're also working as volunteers. So understanding the kind of places that they are working in, even how they most like to do their work, and where it's located, what the workplace priorities are, and how they can best be managed. So this can tell us a lot about the whole labor sector within a city, and also how activities and structures flow because different people work best in different circumstances. And also that it allows us to see how to actually invite in economic development. One thing that we should never underestimate is the power of our communities. So we ask people to tell us about our communities and neighborhoods. And I always like the picture of that I have on this slide, because it just gives to me a glorious sort of surge of pride and fun in our community. And telling us how we would view the kinds of questions that we were asking about intentions and actions and health and the social situations in the community. The mesh scan not only collects quantitative data, but also requests examples to be given. So that gives us a lot of qualitative data as well. Some of the other slides, I'm just going to speed through them. So we finish in the mesh scan with the community culture and change. And so we actually ask people to rate their agreement across a number of different statements that say people are respectful or polite, elders trust young people, growing global connections grows wealth, resilience in the face of change. And when we can see the people's responses here, we can have a perspective of the conditions of change that actually exist in the city. Excuse me. I have the same tickle that Ferial has.
I know, right? Just cough away,
So-
man.
I can't find the mute button to indicate I could do that. Just
So
a
just
second here.
drink some.
Here, I just found it.
Take a moment.
So I found the mute button. That's good. Okay, so last thing that we pick up in the mesh scan is how we respond to governance. This is very interesting. I'm working now in the eco village where I live, and we're working through some of the things that Nate is an expert in with his knowledge of sociocracy and neighborocracy. And so even finding out that people respond differently to how they are governed is really insightful. And finally, when we look at the stages of change, we can see that people have different perspectives about how they're experiencing change in the city. And if everybody thinks that everything is okay, nothing much is going to change. But here we can see that the responses that people could rate would be not only that things are okay, but I'm feeling edgy, I'm feeling trapped, I'm excited but hopeful of good times. I found fresh ways to deal with things, as compared to all hell is breaking loose, or I fear trouble is brewing. And then the last one is one that we all hope will happen after all our polycrisis, is that we actually feel change, that a huge burden has lifted off of me. We also ask people to think about how they respond to the change at different aspects of their lives, and whether they in fact thrive on different kinds of change. Because perhaps you know people who really don't like change at all, and they like things to be very predictable and stable, but other people who actually thrive on chaos. So being able to see the 4 different options that we give around rating change as either chaotic, ordering, predictable, or moving in swirls and currents can also give us a sense of how can we best support the city or the neighborhoods in the changes that they might be going through. So those are some of the features of the mesh scan, and they are really, as Ferial indicated at the beginning, they're designed so that we actually get all of the holons in the city able to be viewed from a perspective where they all are working together, but also show us the differences that make a difference, so that we are not just trying to apply one size fits all to any kind of approach to changes in the city, but really being able to listen to how people want to express themselves and how they will respond most effectively to any ways that they might cooperate and collaborate and become a part of the change process, that it's not done to them, but done with them. So that's what I have to say about the mesh scan, Ferial, and I know that my colleague Marina Demchenko will have many more insights to share when she talks about the inner key, which is a really nice set of different technology but related that works well with this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I mean, when I listen to this, the thing that comes to my mind is on the shoulder of giants. And what I mean by this is you've spent a lifetime, actually studying and looking at this work, and what a gift to us and what a gift to the world. And so I mean, Marilyn is just describing the mesh scan, but there is a whole bunch of other things that I know you have designed. We didn't have time to explore that today. But really, this is what Living Cities Earth comes with, is with the kind of expertise and knowledge that you bring. And as one of our, core original co-founders, they call you the OGs, right? And you were here before I even arrived. So what was very insightful as I watched this again, I mean, I know this stuff, right? But as I watched this again, I saw it through the lens of dating my city. Because if you think about it, right? But so I'm a dancer. Right, I do the Latin dances. And so for me, like the best dancers were the ones that were couples, because they knew each other and they got time to figure out the moves and what, what this person liked, what they responded to. And so for me, when we looked at what Gian and them set us up for, Gian and Andy, where it was like, the more that you don't have knowledge, the more stress and strain is created, because the more you are stepping over the boundaries of another, right? And the more that you invest into getting to know each other, the more that you know where that person's boundaries is. I often have a little saying we teach each other how to treat each other, right?
We do.
So
We
so
do.
in essence, I just want to make it really, really practical, because very often, I apologize for the doctors in the room, but very often we make it into these highfalutin languages. And whilst they are very necessary, and while we can build on what you have worked on, I think it is so crucial in this moment to ground it into how do we use this in the city. And so I am so wonderfully, again, ignited in, oh my gosh, we can teach them how to date each other and actually figure out, how can we do this better? I mean, can you imagine the businesses, the communities, whatever, if we have this rich data? So if anybody's listening out there, and if you really listen like I listened today, then I wonder if you could be a conduit, you could be an ambassador, a spark in your city to say, wow, could I invite our mayor and our administrators and say, can we put some of our people, or as many as we can? Imagine a city does this. Right. And so we could understand, and we could actually navigate this complexity with a lot more grace than we're doing at the moment.
Yes,
So-
indeed. And it's very insightful when the city gets this kind of information, because it is often the invitation to sit down and actually have deep, deep dialogues, to really learn a lot of what Andy and Yun were talking about, and yourself, the opportunity to really listen to each other and to stop and reset before we go. Yeah.
Absolutely
So
beautiful.
thank you.
So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Marilyn. I know you got to run right now, but thank you so much for being here. You've been a trooper all these hours. And
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that said, we've had our colleague Todd Johnson come in. And I remember what I said earlier. Those of you who have been here on the call, Todd's mom, Gail, was one of our co-founders. And Gail did a profound body of work in the time that she was on this earth. And she died in her 80s, and she died just very recently. She literally died as she was doing Living Cities Earth work with one of our co-founders. And she was just phenomenal. And we got to get Todd into our community through this process. So again, back to what Gian just mentioned, whilst death is obviously horrible and we miss her so much, right? But she gave life to Todd, and her and Todd worked intensely together, and look at that new life, and the same is going to happen to Todd and to me and to Gian. And this is how we celebrate. Actually, we celebrate Gail's life. And so I want to invite you, Todd. Thank you so much for being here today, to share with us a little bit. Sorry, I just realized that I skipped over Marina. I apologize, but I'm going to go to Todd and go back to Marina. And talk about Marilyn's mesh scan, giving us this kind of view of the city, and how could we accurately, or these tools that we use, like what Marilyn has shared and what Marina's going to be sharing just after you, How do these tools allow us to accurately diagnose the areas of development for a particular community? But how can the decades of work that you and your mom and some others that you've been working on actually help us in learning how to now, once we understand this, how do we practically co-create and design collaboratively within complex systems, right? And particularly our planet being a very complex system that we're a part of. So, and why obviously is that important for us to know and to understand?
Hey, thanks, Ferial, and hello, everybody. I apologize that I joined late, so I did miss out on some conversation, but I've been in the last half hour or so. And Ferial, you're right as a facilitator is great. You just threw me a curveball. You didn't ask me the question you told me you were gonna ask me, so I'll pivot with it. I'll go with it. It's all good because I picked up enough of the conversation, and I think I get the gist of it. And so, just a couple minutes maybe about me and my background. So, as Ferial mentioned, it was my mom and my stepdad have been. They are pioneers from the 70s in terms of looking at ways of working and ways people can collaborate to solve for complicated and complex and chaotic situations, and have done it across different contexts, from community to organizational to regional, and whatnot. So, and I joined in with them years and years ago, and have worked in what I would consider kind of the broad field of designing and facilitating collaboration. And so the first thing I would say, Ferial, the question that I was set up to answer was around how do we co-create systems that enable people to, all species and all people to be healthy and happy and in harmony with nature, right? And so I'm like, well, I have a really great simple answer to that, and that is I don't know. So and it's because there is so much, like when we talk about things like health and happiness and harmony, like there's so much nuance and variability and relativity to that question of what is health, what is happiness, who decides, what level of system are we talking about? Because we've heard today people have talked at the individual level, the family level, neighborhood. Marilyn talked about the city level. All of it, and why they are fractal, and there are patterns that repeat. They're also different, and you can't, scaling isn't just a matter of just doing more, because the nature of things change based upon how big they are and who's involved in all of this, and from what experience from what vantage point do we experience the system, from whether it's, those philosophers, culture, policy, people on the front lines of implementing practice to folks who are more into the research or learning or teaching, all of those things. So I'm sure folks on this call today, certainly my colleagues in the Lead Systems Earth, in the 6 months or so I've been a part of the community, I've learned that most all of you recognize and appreciate as much as I do that an inquiry into what we call systems and systems change, let alone purposeful, intentional change, is a deeply humbling inquiry, right? And anybody that isn't humble about this probably isn't on the right track, because we found out that the easier the answers come, the less useful or enduring those answers seem to be. Now, having said all that, getting to your question, Ferial, maybe I can say some things that are useful and not just be be waylaying these efforts. And so, what is to say that we collectively do have some really good ideas, some theories and practices upon which breakthroughs that do bring us closer to this notion of health and happiness and harmony may be realized. And so, of all the things I could say or could choose from, what I would like to talk about is what are a few conditions that we want to nurture and need to be embraced in order to potentially get at this. And I think some of them touch on some of the things the previous speakers have talked about. One is requisite variety. All right, now this is called Ashby's law. It comes from the systems sciences, but I am not so much a scientist myself. But basically, it says the larger the variety of actions available to a control system, the larger the variety of perturbations it's able to compensate. So that is to say that if we're thinking as designers, as co-creators, as influencers into the systems in which we inhibit, and activate on, then we have to have representation in ourselves that is requisite with the variety of perturbations that the system is experiencing, right? So this gets at things like inclusion and participation and representation are all part of that. But requisite variety, I think, is just a really nice, because it's agnostic about those things. It's not saying everybody deserves to be included or whatnot. It's saying, look, in order to do this, it's going to take all of us. It's just the way it is. It's not a value judgment. It is a condition of what needs to be, in the system in order for it to respond in ways that don't have lots of unintended consequences that have been talked about. So the second one, and this is something that I've really taken on over the last several years, is for a long time there was this thing called human-centered design, right? And it was great. It was wonderful in design thinking, and I've used these tools powerfully, and they are very useful tools. But now I believe one of the most important things we need to do is have decentered human design, right? Which is really getting at the more than human world. And that we're, whether it's artificial intelligence or the intelligences that are a part of every being on the planet, plant, animal, something in between, we don't know, and the exciting news is that we're learning, we're beginning, on the very beginning, to be able to combine and decode and understand and translate some of these intelligences, and artificial intelligence no less than among them, and using artificial intelligence to unlock intelligences of other species and things like this is really important. Now you say, wow, that's really abstract. How does that mold into a practice that everyday ordinary people in a city or people in a group could go at together, could engage? Well, here's one example. I've got my virtual on, but this is a book by James Bridle, which is really it's a couple of years old now, and it's a book that really talks about this more than human world. And what the idea of reading a book together and then bringing that book to your context is a simple, we call it a syntopical reading, which comes from Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book. Anyway, I won't get into it, but I have done this countless times, whether it's that book or others, where you get a community together and you all read different chapters of it, and then you come together and you talk about what you've learned, and then you apply that, you infuse whatever issue it is that you're dealing with, and let it be informed by the wisdom or by the perspective of the author, whether it's ways of being, whether it's Nora Bateson. I've heard that, Nora's come up a few times, and I think she's She's like on my small bookshelf of people who really need to be paid attention to right now, who are working warm data, who work with somaticity and how like dealing with multi-contextual relationships, how important it is. But it even goes back, like in the work that I've been doing, even back in the 80s and 90s. First, it was like Janine Benyus wrote Biomimicry, right? And I'm sure many of you might be familiar with that book. And Kevin Kelly wrote a book called Out of Control. This is about the worlds of the made and the born. And so as a anecdote to what I'm saying, or a useful tool, you know, you can take these works of art and these bodies of knowledge that have these ideas in them, and you can read them and let the people, let whoever you're reading it with come from where they are. So it's not about, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a way of taking this idea, these ideas in these books, and bringing them in. And so the things that it's resulted in, for example, workshop I was doing years ago with a cosmetics company, right? And one of their participants of the course of event read Why Elephants Weep. So a book about the emotional lives of animals. And they were all reading, everybody was reading different books, and then they come up and be the author and say why they wrote this book. And as a result of her reading this book and then expressing this to the team, within 2 weeks of that workshop, they had quit animal testing at all their facilities, right? So change can come. So how do you get the more than human world into our thinking? It's introducing the ideas, and more than trying to change people's mindset, change their context, because we all act in context. And so if you can change the context, that's a much easier way than trying to change someone's mind, right? Yeah. So and then a couple more things. So I mentioned a little bit about transcontextuality, and then the last key, is play. And that is this notion that we're not going to work our way to a higher order. We're not going to work our way to a more right and ripe way of being. We have to play our way there. And by play here, I'm kind of in the spirit of Stephen Nachmanovitch and his book Free Play, where he talks about the divine play, the rambunctiousness, the play of creation and destruction, of being engaged fully with our hands and our hearts, and then to not be so committed to sense making, but nonsense making, and to inefficiencies, because that is really where the treasures lie. And I know I've sounded very abstract, but for each of these things that I've talked about, there are very specific ways of crafting activities and conversations for groups of any size to engage in, and then to move through a change process, picking up and reintegrating these things in the context of that group or of that individual. And so those are ways that I like to go about my work, and combining it with the work of the other folks in Living Systems Earth that I'm getting to know.
Well, that's super powerful, because you're really talking about experiential learning, right? We're actually literally an empathy building, right? Because we're understanding, we're putting ourselves into the context of someone else, and learning like in a most profound kind of way. So thank you so much, Todd. And I mean, very often as well, even as you've sat in some of our sessions in various different meetings and things, just your intuitiveness and that kind of toolbox that you come with of, you saw us being stuck with something, and you're like, well, actually, this can help you, that can help you. And I think in a way that's really as well an area of consultancy we could bring to cities, because it is, via the work that you do, which is, oh, we're going to get stuck, right? Because we don't have everything we need to we have perhaps very wonderful ideas about certain things, but there's always that thing of, okay, what could help us more? And it's sometimes having that person that is observing and then has this toolbox to be able to say, oh, actually, this can unstuck you over here. So absolutely beautiful. And it's been such a blessing to us in the community. But yeah, you made it me, as you were sharing, just reflect on some work that Bang and I, for example, were doing on a piece of work that Bang had done, a piece of artwork of which is essentially you know, a story that we're telling, right? And so you talk about a book, but it could be any artifact that you would use within community, and it opens up that door. And I would say I like the work of Brené Brown, where it's like that vulnerability is required, right? And that artwork, that thing that you grapple with, because it's pulling at the heartstrings of some of your own experiences, right? And so what happens is you're able to open up and be vulnerable to allow yourself to have an experience and see the world from that different place, the different vantage.
Yeah, and just let's just say, on that, the whole notion of experiential learning, or not, which I absolutely agree with. I also just will remind us that everything is an experience, right? We are having an experience now, and so what is the experience we want to create? And this is, I think, one of the greatest challenges still to be met for how we are meeting today in this virtual world, where we are all smashed flat on each other's screens, right? And we're not really fully with each other. Now, again, I'm not trying to waylay that. It's still very powerful in certain ways. But for us to be able to be head, hearts, and hands, I think it's still important. Like, if we were each of us journaling today or building something with our hands, so that at the end we could hold up, here's what I built, over this conversation, and creating physical artifacts, I think is something we still need. Not still, we need to continue to work and develop to bring more embodiment, I guess, to the virtual world of working together.
But that's what's beautiful. We continue to learn, right? We're on a journey. So thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate your input today. And of course, those listening, it's Todd Johnson that just shared with us. And of course, his work is woven into the fabric of what we do in Living Cities Earth. So if you need those kind of expertise, yeah, we're here to serve. And next, I want to really invite Marina. And Marina spent years developing something called inner keys. And we heard earlier from Marilyn, and her and Marilyn work quite closely together with this. And Marilyn developed the mesh scan that you heard more about earlier. And these things really work in quite a good harmony with each other. But this is another tool that's quite exceptional to use in the cities. And it's really that back to our data of it all, right? How do we see each other? How do we see ourselves? How do we... And in a city, the inner keys really makes that so visible for us if we can get enough participation and honest participation, obviously, with this. And so, again, whilst all our tools that, as I will say it again, so that you're hearing me, is these are imperfect tools, but they are very useful tools because they already doing a lot better than what we've been doing before, right? So, but even with Marina, Marilyn, everybody that is shared, we continue to evolve these products so they become even better and even more effective. So Marina, tell us, in Living Cities Earth, we talk about a city being living, right? And what do we mean by that? Because people are already alive in the city. So we talk about a living city being a place where people can feel fully alive, human well, manifest their creative potential, and live these happy, healthy lives in harmony with each other and with all of the rest of life. Now, you developed this inner keys because it was about us being able to do that, being able to offer something unique. So tell us more about what these inner keys are and how they can actually be applied.
Thank you so much, Ferial. Yes, into the continuation of presentation of Marilyn, I would like to say that first of all, you mentioned earlier, Ferial, that I have been appointed as an official advisor to the mayor on the holistic well-being and happiness of citizens. So this was their first ever position officially appointed on the happiness and well-being in the world, and it was in 2020. But I also want to mention that in 2011, when I wrote my PhD dissertation, it was mostly focused on the holistic development of the territories and understanding how we can impact. And one of the most important findings in my manuscript, in my work, in my research work in those times was that it's really important for us to focus on the citizens' engagement. So when I was invited as an advisor to the mayor, my main task was to, first of all, to engage citizens, to find the ways how we can create this mutual space of trust and collaboration in the city between, as Marilyn says, 4 voices of the city, which is local authorities, businessmen, civil sector, and citizens who are just living in the city and making it alive. And the second question was how we can manage, how we can measure it. So what could be done in order to understand how people perceive those wonderful projects and endeavors and improvements which local administrations are trying to provide in their cities. And the third question was how to enhance it by their citizens and how to engage their creative potential into the improvement of the city, because as you maybe, so most of you know that there are big cities with big budgets, with big power, with big politicians, but most of the cities in the world, they are rather small, they are not so powerful, they don't have a lot of money. So my city, where I was the advisor on the holistic well-being and happiness, it was not happy at all, because it was a small mining city with the obsolete infrastructure, with a lack of opportunities for people. So many young people left this territory, and our idea was what could be done. So that's how the inner key survey was developed in 2020, and since this time more than 13,000 of people in the world took part in this survey, because it was held not only in this small city but globally. And first of all, we started in Russia, and now we are implementing this, and it is launched in several cities now as well. So the main focus and the main idea was to create the tool which sort of proved by these thousands of people who took part in the survey and the results of the cities, about which I also would like to tell you. It proved that we can perceive the city as a living organism, and it is really important to perceive this survey as the MRI. So if as you make the MRI scan in the hospital, you also can make this MRI scan for the city, looking where are the pain points, where can be, and these pain points are usually the leverage points. So the results of this survey give us an opportunity, first of all. So I will tell and share maybe some slides about this methodology, so that you understood what we are measuring and what is going on. The results, we usually present the results at the strategic sessions for these cities, where we invite all the people who are caring about their city, the participants of this survey, and with the presentation of these results, this presentation of these results are usually followed by the strategic session, again, including all city voices of the city, all 4 voices of the city. And due to these facilitated sessions, lots of wonderful, absolutely wonderful projects took place. So, for example, I would like to, so my favorite is the park full of roses. So citizens, all citizens of the city decided to plant themselves 400 roses in the central park of the city. So the administration supported this initiative, and they sort of bought the plants, and all citizens came in one Saturday and planted these roses in the central park, and people brought their children, and they pointed the roses which they planted together, and the whole city took care of these roses for several years, and now are also taking care of these roses. In another city, the citizens suggested to have their joint educational program, and administration supported this project, and we came and conducted their master classes for several days, where city administrators, representatives of their local authorities, businessmen, and the leaders of their non-government organizations of the city were working and learning together how to make their city more alive. And another wonderful case is an oak grove, which was a little bit full of waste, I would say, and local people took the initiative and brought it to life, and they had the discussions, and they agreed with the local administration to make it a reserved zone, because this grove was initially planted by the Peter I in the 18th century in the city of Taganrog, where sort of it was founded by Peter I, the Russian emperor of the 18th century. So they created the reserved oak grove in the name of this Russian emperor, and this case made the name for the city for the whole country. So what we are going to do, as I mentioned, we are perceiving in Living Cities Earth, the city, as the most sustainable social system, which helps us to provide this positive change, which help people understand and take their own responsibility for what they are doing, and for their own lives, and for them, how to say, for their prosperity of the places where they live. So this is how our inner key. So I will show you some slides. So we are unlocking sustainable growth for the inner key. So as I mentioned, is the MRI scan, which can help us understand the sustainability of development of different complex social systems, be it teams, organizations, communities, cities, and also this survey can be taken individually in order to understand what are the gaps and what are the opportunities to develop a person, an organization, a city, or even a country. So inner key measures holistic happiness. So we created the index, and it's really important that this index measures not only their level of satisfaction, which is objectively measured by many indices in the world, but we were the first who started measuring the proactive engagement of people. So positive motivation, how people are ready to engage and to decide how they can contribute to the development of their city. So we have quantitative and qualitative assessment and make this comprehensive evaluation of the condition of health of their city system. We measure different indicators. We see dissonances, we can anticipate and risks and predict the further development of the city. So that is why when we are presenting the results of the survey, we can together with citizens, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important not to come and tell to the citizens or to the city how to develop and what to do, but having the results of this survey, we are trying to create the action research together and to understand what could be done precisely with this territory through this multidimensional analysis. And again, that's the realistic picture, because it's not about the statistics, which is provided by local authorities or maybe some specific organs, but this is the reflection of cities of thousands of people in the cities. So we measure satisfaction of human needs, we measure happiness and well-being, we can predict consumption aspirations and the level of engagement and proactive manifestation of human values. We see the correlation between needs and values, and it's really important because if people value some parameters much, but needs are not satisfied, we can see that these could be the cause of, and we can predict some social tensions in the city. And this gives us an opportunity to have the acupuncture solutions, which with small budgets and with small efforts can solve the problem and can make the social system and the society more happy and more healthy. So we are working with moral attitudes and opinions. It's really important because people are operating on different levels of value development and on different values of needs and their sort of aspirations. And it's really important to understand and to talk to people in their own language, because very often city administrations, especially when people are coming from other cities, they are thinking that they know what people need. And understanding their cultural level, understanding their level of perception, understanding their values and their sort of beliefs, we can bring people clarity and speak to them. So in marketing language, we can speak to them in their language. So we bring coherence into the leadership. We provide sustainability and cultural coherence, because if you see the fluctuations, if you see the discrepancies between the parameters, again, we can predict that there is the points of potential tensions or maybe actual tensions. And again, we can recommend some specific solutions how to improve their social system development. Again, I mentioned that we are looking not only on the happiness of consumption, sort of satisfaction of needs of people, so sort of the hedonistic approach. We are also focusing on the happiness of creation and care, because nothing like contribution, belongingness, passion, engagement, nothing like this can bring people the sense of their I would not say simply importance, but the purpose for their lives. And through this way, we can provide people the purpose of taking care of for their territory and of bringing more aliveness to the places where they live, and to reevaluate their own role in this process, which is most important. So this is the framework. We are operating on the personal, organizational, and societal level. We look both at the individual and collective aspects. We use an integral approach in order to see the subjective and objective areas of development. And in this case, we have 3 layers, 12 aspects of development, 24 parameters of change. And since we are talking about different levels of value concepts, we use spiral dynamics approach. We use the theory of Susan Kugreuter, of Abraham Maslow, Ken Wilber, and many other, Robert Keegan, and many other outstanding, I would say, scientists of 20th and 21st century. We have 122 parameters, so almost 200 parameters, which are interconnected and interrelated to each other. And due to this comprehensive analysis, so I used the term, sort of the metaphor of MRI scan for the organism, we can provide a very clear understanding of where are the gaps, what can be done just right now, how we can support citizens, how we can engage them, how we can bring them more value, how we can give them purpose. And mostly important, we can show their local administrations, their perceptions of citizens, and we can communicate to citizens what precisely local administration wants to provide and to improve their well-being and happiness. So I will not sort of, I will just show you some slides. So this is the correlation between needs and values in terms of cultural development through across 8 key of cultural concepts. We can predict where are the next steps of the development, correlation between needs and values of each people on individual, on organizational, and societal level. Again, we have indices, so we can not only compare, but we also can make and measure this this index in time in order to understand what parameters improved in some time, and maybe some parameters can go down, and again we can understand why. So it could be measured in dynamics. So through different perspectives, through 4 quadrants, through correlation between engagement and satisfaction, and many other things which we can provide. So through the lens of 8 cultural aspects and 4 quadrants, comparison. So this is only for one level, for personal level, psychological well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, financial well-being. And we also look at, as I mentioned earlier, at several others. So I will just show you again the part which, yes, so this is, so we are looking at on the organizational level, we are talking about their well-being in the team, their understanding of their well-being at the workplace. So it is really important for people to understand that they are in their comfortable and sort of proactive space where they work, communication well-being, how people interact with each other in their teams, and operational well-being, how the process and the workflow management is going, because it's really important when people understand that everything is clear and they understand the rules, how their organization operates, and what is the impact of the organization to the wider society. Again, speaking about this nestedness and the holistic approach. Speaking about a city, it's really important to speak about local identity, about their level of education and the understanding of their citizenship in people's perception, about social relations, level of institutional development, speaking about politics, societal development, economic development in the city, socio-cultural well-being and impact of the city to the nation, to the planet. So the role of the city in the world, it's also really important to understand how people perceive it and what we can do in order to make people be proud of their territory, of their place, and love it even more and take care of it, of course. And infrastructural VS or maybe plus environmental well-being, it's also very important how we take care of our built environment and what we do and how we perceive our work towards preserving and developing and regenerating their natural environment and the bioregions. So this is a small sort of review of what we are doing and how we are working. And of course, I had no much time to present the whole result and the whole report. But at the same time, I would like to say that if we know the system, if we know what people think, if we know how to operate in this society, how we can interact with this social system, we can heal it, we can improve it, and we can make it alive. So first of all, I would like to finish my sort of report with our tagline. It is really important to human well together for aliveness with love. So if you understand your native city, if you understand people, and if you love people, persons, people, places, and if you're operating from the level of love to planet, everything is possible, and you can do as much as as you can imagine.
Marina, we just want to say thank you for sharing. And as you heard, this is one of the key tools we're going to be using in Living Cities Earth, that we're offering to cities around the world if they really want to understand their people, understand how they can address the real issues within their cities. And what makes it even more powerful is that we are designing a system of mapping right now, where it's one of our programs we're developing, where we'll be mapping all the things the others have been talking about, Todd and Yuri and Gian and Adi and our other 100 co-founders, and hopefully our 1,000 right now strategic partners, so that we could then, as that diagnosis takes place, so we map in these 24 markers that Marina has just shared, that inner keys will highlight, right? And then what we would be able to do, just like the doctor does, is if you've got problems in the city, we can offer you solutions that are very tailored to the problems and the challenges that your city is facing. you know, and then also we can also celebrate and learn from the areas of your city or your place that you love is doing really well. So thank you so much, Marina. And I want to invite, sorry, I'm just getting all carried away with this. I want to invite Yuri. And Yuri, you know, just going back to what Todd had originally said, Todd had talked about our relationships with the rest of nature and how we would obviously navigate that and the things we could do to get in touch with that and listening into that voice, right? Or those other voices. So I guess how does what you've been working on with myself and others in what we call BAMA maps, how do they help us reconnect with nature and why, of course, Todd shared a lot about why it was important for us to do that. But tell us more about BAMA maps and the possibilities that it can provide for cities right now.
Yeah, now you hear my daughter in the background, maybe. And I feel, you know, what makes us reconnect is sometimes we need to scream, you know, and say what we want to say. But I will say two
Don't you
things.
dare scream.
Yeah. You know, I'm too old to scream, I guess. But I think I'll share just the presentation, the rest of my presentation. And this is interesting because that's the AI, which I like to think that artificial intelligence is not like the best name to use here. It's artful innovation, because I don't feel there is nothing artificial or it's nothing really intelligent in artificial intelligence. It's just a new way that we humans has invented to deal with the overload of data and information that we have collected over millenniums. And there are many doors to walk on. So I love this image that the AI generated for the human disconnect, which I didn't choose for the opening. And that's two other images. And I feel we're lost in this mind story, in this map mind, in this story of Western culture, in this weird landscape of artwork that was generated with this human disconnect, these two different images that were connected, and I overlaid them. And then I asked the AI, and I like what the AI is doing right now is that it sort of makes visible how everything is a dialogue, you know, that learning, knowledge creation is always a dialogue between answer a question. And in a way, I feel it's much more creative than just having the right answer, right? This is two other images were created about just I was writing something around technology and reconnection and one thing. And I think right now we are in a moment of what story will we choose as humanity? Will we choose kind of the shiny same kind of technology of that we call it connection, but is it really connection, or will we choose some other kind of connection? And just to connect with Todd, I've been very inspired in my practice, in my facilitation in theater practice by the work that Reconnects of Joanna Macy. And I've been integrating the theater work that I'm doing to give voice to the other than human and using kind of theater as a way to give voice to the beings other than human. And again, the other than human also includes the plastic, includes the AI itself, includes all of that. And then play, you know, creation. So what is BAMA Map? So our mission, it's a startup, we're starting to offer tools for people, organization, institution to create AI-powered well-being journeys. And I will say that not all, we don't necessarily mean artificial intelligence here. AI could also be artful innovation, and AI is optional. But it is a very powerful new tool that I believe that we can use tools to disconnect and we can use those tools to reconnect. And the idea is to reconnect people to their sources of health, their happy places, this ecosystem of nature-inspired learning experiences are a platform where we are connecting to this capacity, innate capacity of nature to support health and improve anxiety and really actually deal with the symptoms, but also with the source for our disconnect and our discontent. The uniqueness is we're developing partnerships with different organizations and technology leaders, both human technology and technical technologies, to get us into a place where we can offer personalized guides, wise leaders. They don't have to be Gandhi, or maybe we can have a Ferial or a Gian to support people in this journey of life, and we can give the SRG journeys, the inner keys, as the framing, as the backdrop for that journey. We can basically use any framework. And the idea is a spatial technology, so we actually don't want people to get stuck in screens like we are here, and we are often, but actually having experiences that people go out in the world. And we're developing partnership with technology companies that are developing tools that goes towards that direction, which kind of breaks us out of the screens and into the world in our learning. And basically to do what? To space for pause, to be creative together and in movement. So this is just this little pieces from our pitch deck, let's say. I love, again, yes, AI is a kind of corporate harvesting of data on the internet, how it is right now being created and used, but can we imagine an AI that is doing something else? And can we, like some people said before in the chat, when we do this thing that we say that it's the corporate fault, and it is, but are we not giving them power? And are we not actually disempowering ourselves from taking the ownership of what is being created in the world right now? So I'm talking about taking ownership of the immense tools that are being created and democratizing them in a way that really benefits the majority of people that are still stuck, me included, but many other even worse, in a story of disconnect. So how do we get people to this reconnection and creating experiences augmented by the potentialities that reconnect people? That's the bottom line of it.
Beautiful, Yuri. I appreciate you sharing so much. And of course, we've been working on a product that will be available soon. Actually, it's available already if any cities around the world want to use it. At the moment, we're calling it Life Maps, but I think we're going to be calling it Reconnect or something to this effect. But as soon as it's really complete, then it allows you to use it as a tool in your city to reconnect people and to reconnect them to the nature and so I think that's the beauty, right, is being able to use that technology towards reconnecting us with where we really need to reconnect. So and feel that oneness. So thank you, Yuri. We've only got just under 15 minutes left, so I'm going to ask the rest of us that need to go if you can kind of curtail it so that we can get through all of us, but just deliver the most important parts, right? So thank you so much. I want to invite our colleague Bong really quickly. This is a very important piece of work that Bong is involved with. And according to Yuri, like our places we live, work, and play certainly hold the key to our reconnection. But there is still the reality we are living through where climate change is a real challenge. And the race to net zero is on for these cities, and they're not reaching these targets. And of course, we heard the story of Adi in the morning, 47 degrees, and that was just one. So, Bang, how is your work going to help us in Living Cities, or helps us in Living Cities Earth, actually address this very particular issues, that are very salient to our situation right now?
Sure. I'll keep mine brief, and I'll do my best to answer it in a straightforward manner. To do that, I want to ground my response on the two problems that from our practice over the past couple of years, we're convinced are the two core problems that cities face, especially cities in the global south that aren't traditional investment centers. Those two problems are a procurement problem and a finance problem. To appreciate those two problems from the perspective of these cities, I'd like to just walk you through a handful of questions that we've found these cities having to ask themselves. Under the finance problem, cities ask this multi-million-dollar waste management project, how can I fund this? These are typically the cities that we work with are typically coastal cities in the global south. They don't have the tax base that the New Yorks and Los Angeleses of the world have. And it's just very difficult to find the funding that's required to deploy available technologies. And so our solution thus far that we've crafted for and with cities is a funder consortium that has a process innovation in it. The funder consortium is designed to aggregate primarily impact investors and institutional investors that we could characterize as more patient money. They're not just interested in getting an ROI in 3 years, but they're patient. They're willing to wait a while for the ROI. And the process innovation is a trio, 3 events that are sequenced together to ultimately lead to investment flow. The first event is a framing event to answer the big so what question. It's a large convening designed to ground the project pipeline or the prospective projects on large regional issues that stakeholders care about, public, private sector stakeholders care about. In this case, ASEAN requires billions of dollars in this next century to meet its NDC obligations. How do we meet that funding challenge? And so that large convening is built to sustain a dialogue around answering those 2 questions. And then finally, the last 2 events are designed to showcase available options based on market-ready technologies, based on how cities have defined, along with us, the priority problem. If it's a wastewater problem, we prioritize the solution on that wastewater problem. And then finally, the third event is a preliminary due diligence event that is designed to move the ball forward as far as getting investors to begin investing, deploying capital into the city projects. That's the finance problem and our solution to that finance problem. What's the procurement problem? What are the questions that we've found cities are asking themselves under the procurement problem? There are quite a few. I'll focus on just 2. Number 1, what available technologies are out there that are credible? Which of these credible solutions actually do what they say they will do? So these 2 questions, these 2 procurement problems, our solution to that is the Zero Emission Consortium. There are 300 plus research labs and technology firms in that consortium. Roughly 25 have distinct technology and infrastructure solutions to wastewater, clean energy, agriculture, waste management issues. And depending on the problem of the city, we stitch together a technology toolkit paired with social equity programming as a solution to that city.
Thank you so much, Bong, for sharing. And of course, Living Cities Earth is available. Come and chat to us. We've got all of this kind of stuff, available to share with your city right now. Nate, Bong has shared about these wonderful technologies and the ways that we can take this to the city, but we've still got some big problems to deal with regards to the power struggle of it all and how this is preventing us from actually doing the real job. So you've got 4 minutes, buddy. Can you give me something in that 4 minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yuri was talking earlier about disconnection, and all of these different dimensions of disconnection. And a lot of my other colleagues here have been talking about ways that we can reconnect. But there's a particular disconnection that is really coming up in my mind, and I think possibly people who are watching this now or in the future might have the same experience. And this is the disconnection between all of the expertise that we're sharing here. And actually, Eco-Village Network is not the right title to give me. If you want to give me a title here, it would be Sonic, Sociocratic Neighborhood Circles, or livingcities.earth. But the issue is that we have a need, an intense need for expertise, the kind that Bong has just been talking about and the kind that so many of my colleagues have been talking about. And what Marina and Marilyn have been sharing with Mesh Scan and the Inner Keys, this hands this kind of map and a way of diagnosing and recommending solutions to the power structure of a city. Tremendously valuable. But we know that if we try to do development in a technocratic way, we will create this, in some cases, literally a civil war, but in other cases, just resistance. We just leave people disempowered and disconnected, and people feel that it is not their thing, and in fact, it is not their thing. And that creates then issues of environmental racism. It creates differences in who gets the fruits of development. It creates all kinds of problems. Well, we are able to connect this gulf using actually practices that come out of South Asia, practices that have come out of the neighborhood parliaments movement and that have been translated into things that we know work in Europe and North America. This is using the sociocratic neighborhood circles model that has come from the work in Southern India, the neighborhood parliaments movement. And fundamentally, this is a governance approach from the bottom up, from the level of the street or the neighborhood, and then creating collaboration at multiple scales. It's resulted in things that we see today called the Carolyn Miracle, and it's large-scale transformative change built on the backs of local collaborative economic empowerment at the smallest scales and going up to collaboration from village to village, neighborhood to neighborhood, city to city. And it enables people to make local decisions about what kind of development they want and to provide development to each other collaboratively. And when we use that approach at the neighborhood level and the area, the town level, the city level, we're able to bring these kinds of mapping tools that we're talking about and these different ways of providing tools for transformation for leaders within themselves and tools of mapping the city and all of these technologies that Bong is talking about and put them in the hands of the people who live there so that there's both a bottom-up movement and a top-down movement, and the disconnection between those two things is healed. And that's what we know works well in the neighborhood parliaments movement in Southern India, and what we have now started to apply in places like Augsburg in Germany. And so now we know it works well in Europe. And we also have examples in North America. And so I'm really excited to be able to connect these things up through livingcities.earth. No idea if that was 4 minutes, but I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you. It was longer, but I'm going to get Audie to, if I possibly can, just to give her last sentence. Audie represents kind of the voice into the UN, and she made a statement a little while ago saying, we are no longer the global South, we are the global majority. And so it's the reason why we have to address this. I'm going to ask Audie to.
And you're on mute, Ferial.
Why did you say it, and why is it important?
All right. So first of all, I did not make the statement. This was a statement that was made by Maria Espinosa. She is the ex-president of the United Nations General Assembly. Yeah, UNGA. So I actually quoted her, and the objective was that everybody here today has actually spoken so phenomenally in terms of the nuances of these universes of problems that we are dealing with that we're calling polycrisis. But at the highest level, and I'm so glad Gian is back here, because him and I, we've had these conversations so many times of how do we reach the dirtiest and the darkest and the highest and the lowest at the same time, right? So this is a population, this is a cadre that is so beyond an address from civil society and movements like ourselves here at Living Cities Earth. But the whole idea is to raise the question of how do we look at the governance systems in the world being so enmeshed with transnational organized crime. So if we want to transition in any of the spaces in this world that are demanding an overhaul, we have to start addressing all of these aspects. So we're not saying, as humans, none of us have the right to tell the other person to get off the planet, but we have to start looking at the motivators within the system that has been functioning so well that it puts the civil society to shame in terms of the level of cooperation, the level of productivity, the level of the error rate, the minimal error rate in what they do. So the question to ask is, what the hell is wrong with the rest of us? And I love asking this question because this is exactly what got the statement in two places, which are very high impact. One is the Pact of the Future that's coming up in September, which is going to be signed by 193 member states. And the statement is also being included as the national security policy for Mexico for 2024. The point is that we need to push the boundaries of fear. We've spoken a lot about fear today. And it is really about saying, okay, I'm anyway destined to be here for 60 years. I've crossed about 40 of those. So, how does it matter if I live or die as long as I'm making that footprint, as long as I'm filling those empty spaces with things that are absent. In terms of social technologies, we are talking in the Unity Week. Unity is the social technology that would distinguish us from artificial intelligence versus social intelligence. We live in a time of information aggregation, but the question to ask is, at what point of time are we also going to aggregate wisdom that is going to define social intelligence versus artificial intelligence? Because that is not a standalone concept. Exactly what Gian said. When ChatGPT came out, it had about 70+% efficiency. And today, because of the nonsense we fed into it, it's become about 37%. And it keeps fluctuating. But that's symbolic of what we hold as information, what we process as information, and what we're going to feed into artificial intelligence, and therefore our social intelligence as well. So I think I'm well within time, but that is actually the statement that that was the reason we made the statement. So interestingly, in this big room, we had only 3 or 4 topics, which were very traditional. And I walked up to the convener and asked him, can we have another topic? And he said, what is your topic? I said, organized crime. He said, nobody's going to come there. So I had like 4 people. And one of them was this youth senator from Mexico who actually took the video and said, we're going to add the statement. The point is, we don't need the crowd. We need people who are fearless, who have a purpose, who can deliver, who can say, hey, I bungled, but I've got a team that's going to support me. And I think this is what Living Cities Earth is about. And for me, this relationship with Ferial and Gian and Andy here started from SRG. The first time I looked at the curriculum, I said, Ferial, the whole world should undergo this. And here we are. So congratulations. 2 years later, we're getting there.
I know it. So that's us to a close. Who is Living Cities Earth? We are Living Cities Earth. You watching us and us. And together, let's do this. Right? Let's speak out and let's get together and let's make that difference, change our trajectory. Thank you very much. This has been Ferial Puren and we're out. Thank you, Hasina.
Thank you, everyone. Good night from here.
It's been amazing. Thank you.
coming.